On Christmas Eve, my father kicked me out at 17 over a stolen $45,000 Rolex I never touched. 4 years later, Grandpa revealed the truth, and while my family faced eviction, divorce, public humiliation, and made me the sole heir to everything they tried to steal. Hey Reddit! My dad threw me out on Christmas Eve for something I didn't do. I built a life without him, and thought I'd left it all behind. But my family's lies and greed came crashing down years later. Before we get there, let me start from the beginning. My name is Cesar Alvarez, I'm 21, and tonight I'm driving back to the town I swore I'd never see again. 4 years ago, my family kicked me out on Christmas Eve. Today, I'm heading home for my grandfather Albert's 75th birthday, the first time I'll see my parents and Anne since that night. The highway is empty, the sky bruised with winter clouds, and the closer I get, the heavier my chest feels. I'm not that 17-year-old kid anymore. I'd built a small e-commerce business, earned my independence, and made a life without them. But no amount of success changes how deep that betrayal cut. Back then, the house was chaos long before that night. My mother, Lydia, was obsessed with appearances. Perfect decorations, perfect dinners, perfect lies. My sister, Anne, was the golden child. Spoiled, dramatic, and cruel in ways only siblings can be. If I breathed wrong, she mocked me. If I stayed quiet, she called me useless. Lydia always backed her up. My father, Stephen, was a powerful attorney who terrified judges and bulldozed opponents. Yet at home, he was silent. Instead of setting boundaries, he let them run the show. If Lydia said I was lazy, he agreed. If Anne said I was a disappointment, he looked away. I learned to live around them, not with them. I spent most of that December buried in scholarship applications, scraping together ideas for a small online business that I hoped would get me out of that house. Late at night, when the house was asleep, I'd slip into Stephen's office to print forms and do research. It was the only place with a working printer and a decent Wi-Fi connection. Christmas Eve arrived cold and brittle. The tree was glowing in the corner, the house filled with the smell of cinnamon and pine. Lydia was in hostess mode, barking orders and polishing wine glasses like the Pope was coming for dinner. Anne paraded around in a designer coat she'd demanded as a holiday essential, snapping selfies in front of the fireplace. I stayed out of the way, trying to help where I could, and counting the hours until the day ended. Then Stephen called me into the living room. "Where is it?" His voice wasn't raised, but there was something dangerous behind it. "Where's what?" I asked, confused. "My watch," he snapped. "The Rolex GMT Master 2 white gold. The one your grandfather gave me when I made partner. $45,000, Caesar. It's gone." I blinked. "I don't know anything about it." Lydia let out a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Of course you don't. That's always your answer. Acting like you're too busy with your little projects to notice anything." "I haven't done anything," I said. "I've been—" "Don't lie," Anne cut in. "I saw you in Dad's office last week, by his drawer, probably planning this." "I was printing out a scholarship application," I said, my voice tight. "I didn't touch anything." Lydia folded her arms, the perfect image of mock concern. "You've been sneaking around for weeks. Desperate. Secretive. It's obvious what you did." "Desperate for what?" I asked, the anger creeping in. "You've never cared what I do. You just want someone to blame." Stephen stepped closer, looming over me. "This isn't about blame. That watch means more to me than you'll ever understand. And now it's gone." "I didn't take it." My voice broke from frustration. "I didn't even know it was missing until now." "Liar." Lydia's voice was cold. "You've been a disappointment since the day you were born. This is just proof." Anne let out a cruel laugh. "Told you, Dad. He's probably trying to sell it to fund one of his fake business ideas." That was it. Something inside me cracked. "You have no idea what I'm trying to do," I said, staring at them. "I'm trying to make something of myself. I'm trying to be better than this." Stephen's eyes hardened. "Don't raise your voice at me. You've embarrassed this family for the last time." "I didn't do anything," I shouted. "You're accusing me of something I didn't—" Before I could finish, Stephen turned to his desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the empty Rolex box. He threw it across the room. It hit the wall beside me and fell to the floor. "Get out," he said, voice low and final. "Pack your things. Leave this house. You're not part of this family anymore." The Christmas tree lights blinked in the corner. Carols played faintly from the stereo. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. And in the middle of it all, my father stood there. Not as a man I loved or respected, but as someone who had decided I was no longer worth claiming. "You're making a mistake," I whispered. "The mistake," Lydia hissed, "was letting you stay this long." Anne smirked, arms folded. "Merry Christmas." I didn't say another word. I walked upstairs, packed a single duffel bag with my clothes and laptop, and walked out the front door. The door slammed behind me before I reached the driveway. The porch light flicked off as if they couldn't bear to see me go. It was Christmas Eve. I had $60 in my pocket, no place to sleep, and no one in that house who cared whether I froze in the snow. That was the night everything ended, and the night I swore they would never have power over me again. Snow was falling hard by the time I reached the end of the street. The lights from my house glowed warm behind me, muffled Christmas music leaking through the walls, a celebration I was no longer part of. My hands were numb, the straps of the duffel bag digging into my shoulder. The cold was sharp, but it wasn't what hurt. What hurt was that they'd done it tonight, on Christmas Eve. Every house I passed looked like a postcard. Families gathered around dinner tables. Children tore into presents. Through frosted windows, I saw smiles, laughter, warmth. I felt like a ghost drifting past someone else's life. My breath fogged in the air, and every inhale burned. I didn't know where to go. I scrolled through my phone and sent a message to Eli, a classmate I'd done a few group projects with. Got kicked out. Any chance I can crash tonight? He replied within minutes. Come by. His family lived in a small townhouse on the other side of town. By the time I got there, my shoes were soaked through and my fingers stung. Eli opened the door, wearing a Santa hat and holding a plate of cookies. Behind him, his family was gathered in the living room watching a Christmas movie. The smell of roast turkey and cinnamon filled the air. Man, what happened? He asked. Long story, I muttered. Can I just crash on the couch? Yeah, of course, he said, stepping aside. His parents appeared a moment later, polite but wary. Caesar, right? His dad asked. Rough night? Something like that. They let me in, but I could feel the discomfort. They spoke to each other in hushed tones when they thought I couldn't hear. I ate a plate of food they offered, but their eyes kept drifting toward me, a stranger in the middle of their holiday. When they exchanged gifts, I sat quietly on the couch, staring at the floor. It was better than freezing outside, but it wasn't home. I left the next morning before anyone was awake. I thanked Eli in a text and told him I'd figure something out. The weeks that followed blurred together. I bounced from one friend's couch to another, 3 nights here, 4 nights there, always careful not to overstay my welcome. At first, people were sympathetic. They offered meals, blankets, even advice. But sympathy doesn't last forever. By the 2nd or 3rd week, the hints started. We're having family visits soon. I need my space back. By mid-January, I was out of places to stay. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the cold cut deeper than anything I'd felt before. I spent nights in bus stations, public libraries, and once, behind a gas station, curled up with my duffel bag as a pillow. I skipped meals to make the cash I had stretch longer. I applied for part-time jobs, but without experience, most places rejected me before the interview. 3 weeks after being kicked out, I decided to return to the house. Not to speak to anyone, just to grab my old laptop from the garage. It was my only tool for scholarship applications and job searches. I waited until evening, hoping no one would see me. They did. Before I could reach the side door, a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. Officer Reed stepped out, his breath visible in the cold. You Caesar? He asked. Yeah. Your mother says you're trespassing. I'm not. I used to live here. I just came to get my laptop. How old are you? Reed asked. 17. He sighed. Technically, they're still responsible for you. But if you don't want to go back, I'm not going to drag you inside. I'll flag CPS and try to reach a relative. Just don't come back here. They're not going to change. I just need... What you need, he interrupted gently, is to stop trying to fix something that's already broken. If you want a future, you build it without them. He let me walk away without charges. I never went back. A week later, I was sitting in the public library using a free computer when a woman tapped me on the shoulder. I turned, and for a second, I didn't recognize her. Mary Ann, my father's older sister. I hadn't seen her in nearly 5 years. Officer Reed pulled my number from a prior report and called me as soon as he could, she said. Told me what happened. I knew your parents were selfish, but throwing you out? On Christmas Eve? She shook her head. You're coming with me. Mary Ann had always kept her distance from Lydia and Anne, calling them snakes in designer shoes. When she heard I was on the streets, she showed up at the library where I'd been spending my days and offered me a room. It wasn't charity. Mary Ann made it clear. If I stayed, I'd have to pull my weight. Within a week, she got me a part-time job at a small auto garage. The work was tough, long hours, grease under my nails, aching muscles, but I didn't complain. It was a lifeline. I started saving every cent. A month later, I bought a rusted, barely running used car for a few $100s. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was a roof when I needed one. When Marianne's spare room wasn't available or I had late shifts, I'd park behind a 24-hour grocery store and sleep there. The grind became my routine. Garage shifts during the day, delivery gigs at night. On breaks, I taught myself coding and digital marketing using free online courses. Every cruel comment Lydia and Anne posted online about their vacations, luxury dinners, family Christmas photos added fuel to the fire. Anne once wrote, "The house feels lighter without dead weight." She meant it as a jab. I took it as motivation. By spring, I'd saved enough to launch a small e-commerce site. It barely made sales, but it was a start, proof that I could build something. A few months later, I landed a competitive tech scholarship. It felt like the first real victory I'd ever earned on my own. One night, months later, I walked past my old neighborhood on my way home from a delivery. The houses were glowing again, music spilling into the street. I stopped across from my family's house. The windows were lit, laughter echoing from inside, the same warmth I'd once watched from the outside. I stood there for a moment, then zipped my jacket and walked away. They chose to throw me out. I was choosing never to go back. 4 years later, I was back to celebrate Grandpa's 75th birthday. The invitation had surprised me. I hadn't spoken to most of my family since the day I left. My father never reached out. Lydia and Anne pretended I didn't exist. But Albert, he was different. Even after I was gone, he sent birthday cards, sometimes even checks, and a handwritten note when I got my scholarship. He was the only one who treated me like I still mattered. When his card arrived with a handwritten note, "I'd like you there. Please come," I knew I couldn't refuse. The driveway was full when I arrived. Expensive cars lined the curb, the kind Lydia loved to name-drop in conversations. The house looked exactly the same. Same porch light, same wreath, same warm glow through the windows. Nothing had changed, except me. I parked down the street and sat in the car for a moment, steadying myself. Then I stepped out, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door. The moment I stepped inside, the noise hit me. Laughter, clinking glasses, music humming from hidden speakers. A few relatives I barely remembered gave polite nods as I passed. Others stared like they'd seen a ghost. Lydia noticed me first. Her smile vanished. "Well," she said, wine glass in hand. "Look who decided to show up. Good to see you too," I said evenly. Anne followed, dressed head to toe in designer labels, a fake smile plastered on her face. "I was betting you wouldn't have the nerve," she said. "Guess I owe Mom $20. I ignored the jab and looked for my father. Stephen was standing by the fireplace with a drink in his hand, deep in conversation with one of Albert's friends. He looked up, saw me, and for a second his expression faltered. Then he gave a stiff nod. Nothing more. The tension in the room was thick, but I kept my head high. I wasn't the kid they'd humiliated anymore. I'd built my life from nothing, and I wasn't here to impress them. "Caesar," a voice called behind me. It was Elena, Albert's attorney and oldest friend. "I'm glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. She lowered her voice. "Albert's been working on something. Don't leave before the toast." I nodded, not sure what she meant. I spent the next hour avoiding conversations. Lydia introduced Anne to anyone who would listen as an up-and-coming entrepreneur, though I knew from social media that her influencer projects were failing. My father pretended I wasn't there. Every time I passed them, Anne's voice rose just loud enough for me to catch a word. Pathetic, still bitter, probably unemployed. I didn't take the bait. I focused on the reason I was there. Albert. It was nearly 9 when the clinking of a spoon against a glass silenced the chatter. Albert stood at the head of the long dining table, his posture straight, his voice strong. "Thank you all for coming," he began. 75 years is a long time to be alive, and I'm grateful to have so much family here tonight." He paused, scanning the room. Then his tone shifted. Slower, heavier, deliberate. 4 years ago, something valuable disappeared from this house. A Rolex GMT Master 2 white gold, $45,000. My son's watch. At the time, my grandson Caesar was accused of stealing it. He was thrown out, disowned. But as of recently, his voice tightened. I learned the truth. The room stilled. Forks hovered in midair. Lydia's smile faded. By chance, I was speaking with an old friend of mine who runs a pawn shop downtown. I mentioned the watch, just a passing comment, and he froze. He told me that just after Christmas that year, a young woman came into his shop with a matching piece. Nervous, shaking, talking too much. A ripple of unease spread across the room. Anne's hands tightened around her glass. "I showed him a photo of the missing watch," Albert continued. He didn't hesitate. Same model, Same serial and engraving. And the name on the paperwork? He paused, letting the silence stretch. Anne Alvarez. The room erupted in whispers. Lydia's face drained of color. Stephen's hand trembled as he set his drink down. Anne stared at the floor, frozen. Through his records, we traced the serial number to the current holder. After the police contacted them, the watch was returned. But I didn't stop there, Albert said, pacing slowly as if presenting evidence in court. I wanted the whole story. So I asked for help, and we followed the money. $15,000 was wired to a debt collector to pay off a boyfriend's gambling problem. $12,000 more paid for a European vacation, first-class flights, five-star hotels, champagne brunches, and $10,000 vanished into a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed in weeks. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. And while all of this was happening, Albert said, his voice rising just slightly, the person you all chose to blame, the one you called a liar and a thief, was trying to survive with nothing. Caesar lost his home, his family, and 4 years of his life because of a story you all never questioned. He turned toward me. Tonight, I want that story corrected. Caesar, you were innocent. You always were. The room was silent. Lydia's lips moved, but no words came out. Stephen stared at the table, unable to look at me. Anne's eyes were glassy with shock, her face pale. I felt a dozen eyes on me, but I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth had been buried for 4 years, and now it was standing naked in the center of the room for everyone to see. I stayed long enough to thank Albert quietly. Then I slipped out before dessert, the cold night air hitting me like a wave. I didn't want to see the fallout. I didn't want apologies. The people inside that house had already shown me who they were. As I walked down the driveway, I realized something had changed. For years, I'd carried the weight of their betrayal like a chain. But now, as snow crunched under my boots and the house faded into the distance behind me, I felt lighter. They had tried to bury me with lies. Tonight, the truth dug me out. I didn't hear from my father for 3 days after Albert's party. Then the messages started. At first, they were full of apologies. Long, desperate texts about how he didn't know the whole story, how he regretted everything, and how he wanted to make it right. Then they shifted. The tone grew colder, angrier. He accused me of turning Albert against him, of brainwashing the family, of humiliating them in front of their friends. I ignored every single one. Then Albert asked me to meet Stephen this once. Against my better judgment, I texted Stephen an address, a small cafe near the old library where I used to study. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with a half-finished cup of coffee. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but there was still that same intensity in his eyes. The same man who had thrown me out on Christmas Eve was sitting in front of me like nothing had happened. "Caesar," he said, standing as if we were old friends. "Thank you for coming. Let's just talk," I replied, taking a seat. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I owe you an apology." His voice was low, measured. "I was wrong. About the watch. About that night. About a lot of things." I didn't respond. I wanted to hear what else he had to say. "I thought I was doing what was best," he continued. "I believed what they told me. And when I saw you in my office, I let my anger take over. I failed you as a father." For a moment I almost believed him. But then his tone shifted. Subtle at first, then sharper. "But you have to understand," he said, leaning forward. "I was under a lot of pressure. I had Lydia in one ear, Anne in the other, and I didn't know what to believe. And now you've gone and turned my own father against me. Do you have any idea what that toast did to me?" The words hit me like a slap. "What it did to you," I repeated. "It told the truth." "That's what it did." He exhaled sharply. "You didn't need to make it public. You could have handled this privately. Instead, you humiliated me. Humiliated our family." "Our family?" I scoffed. "The same family that called me a thief and threw me out into the snow without a second thought? The same people who ignored me for 4 years while I was sleeping on floors and working 2 jobs to survive?" His jaw tightened. "Caesar, I'm trying to fix this." "No," I said. "You're trying to fix how it looks. There's a difference." The conversation shifted fast, from calm to confrontational. He slammed his palm lightly on the table. "You don't understand what it's like to have everything you've built fall apart because of one mistake. I lost clients. Friends stopped calling. People think I'm a fool." "You are a fool," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You believed a lie because it was easier than believing me, and now you're paying for it." "Watch your tone," he snapped, the old authority creeping back into his voice. "No," I said quietly. "I'm done watching my tone. You kicked me out like trash. You let them destroy my name. You didn't even answer my messages when I begged you to hear me out. And now that the truth is out, you're still trying to blame someone else." The silence between us was sharp. People at nearby tables were starting to glance over. Stephen looked around, embarrassed, then leaned in. "I'm asking you to move on. We're still family. We can rebuild." "Family?" I repeated. "Family protects you. Family listens. Family doesn't throw a 17-year-old out on Christmas Eve without proof." His voice hardened. "You're being dramatic. I already said I was sorry." "No," I said, standing now. "You said you were sorry you got caught, not sorry for what you did." He stood too, his face flushed. "You think you're better than me now? Because Albert's giving you money? Because you got a few scholarships?" "I don't think I'm better than you," I replied. "I just know I'll never be like you." Something in his eyes shifted. Anger, pride, maybe even fear. But he didn't stop. "One day, you'll regret this. One day, you'll understand how much I sacrificed." I stared at him for a long moment before answering. "You didn't sacrifice anything. You threw away your son." I turned and walked toward the door. He called my name, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I stood outside the cafe for a few minutes, the winter air biting at my face. I should have felt angry, but I didn't. What I felt instead was clarity. Cold, unshakable clarity. My father hadn't come to apologize. He'd come to rewrite the story. He wanted forgiveness without accountability, redemption without consequences. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't owe him either. I pulled my phone from my pocket and blocked his number. The cycle ended here. 2 weeks passed after the cafe confrontation. I hadn't heard from my father since the day I walked away, and I thought that might be the end of it. But then Albert called. His voice was calm, but there was something deliberate beneath the surface. "I need you to come by the house," he said. "There's something we need to talk about. Privately." When Albert used that tone, it was never about small talk. I drove over the next morning, unsure what to expect. He greeted me at the door with a firm handshake and led me into his study, a room that smelled of old books and cedar, lined with decades of family history. On the table in front of him were several folders, each thick with documents. "What's all this?" I asked. "Evidence," he replied, "and a very big problem." Albert explained that after the truth about the watch came out, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. The way Lydia and Anne had manipulated my father so easily, the way they lied without hesitation, it had left him unsettled. So he started digging. It began with a review of the family company's financial records. At first, everything looked fine. Then the inconsistencies started showing up. Small withdrawals here, unaccounted transfers there. The deeper he went, the uglier it became. Over the course of 3 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars had quietly disappeared from company and personal accounts. Lydia had been issuing company credit cards in her name, charging them with business expenses that were actually designer handbags, spa treatments, and private chauffeurs. Anne had been funneling company funds into side ventures, failed influencer projects, expensive vacations, even a short-lived clothing brand that collapsed in months. And that wasn't the worst of it. Albert opened another folder and slid a document across the desk. It was a loan agreement, a substantial one, taken out under Stephen's name, but the signature wasn't his. "Forged?" I asked. Albert nodded. "Your mother signed it. She used the money to bail Anne out of a crypto scheme gone bad. $500,000 gone in a single night." I stared at the paperwork. It wasn't just greed. It was reckless, calculated betrayal. They hadn't just destroyed trust. They had been bleeding the family dry while blaming everyone else for their mess. Then Albert leaned back and added something that caught me off guard. "And you asked me once why Anne ever pawned the Rolex in the first place. If they were capable of stealing so much, why bother with that?" I nodded. The question had been eating at me. "Because that happened before all of this," Albert said. "At the time, they didn't have access to company accounts. Lydia wasn't part of the business yet, and Anne didn't know how to move money without getting caught. They needed fast, untraceable cash, and they needed it immediately." He flipped another page showing bank statements. Her boyfriend was deep in debt. Not credit card debt. The dangerous kind. Loan sharks, threats. They needed tens of thousands of dollars within days. The company funds were too risky to touch then. Too many eyes, too much paper trail. But your father's Rolex? She could pawn it that afternoon and walk out with cash before anyone noticed. It made perfect sense. The watch theft hadn't been part of a grand plan. It was panic. A desperate, impulsive move before they grew bolder and turned their crimes into something much larger. "What about my father?" I asked quietly. "He's clueless," Albert said. "Or maybe he chose not to see it." Either way, he let them run wild, and now they've nearly destroyed everything I built. I leaned back in the chair. What are you going to do? Albert's expression hardened. I'm cutting them off. All of them. He wasn't speaking figuratively. Over the next hour, he laid out his plan. His lawyers were already restructuring the family trust. My father's name was being removed as a beneficiary. Every asset, real estate, shares, bonds, would bypass him entirely. The money that was supposed to sustain him in retirement? Gone. Lydia and Anne? They wouldn't see a cent. They had their chance, Albert said, and they proved they can't be trusted with the legacy of this family. I didn't know what to say. It was a monumental decision. Not just a punishment, but a final judgment. There's one more thing, Albert added. I'm setting aside a portion of the estate for you. Not because you're entitled to it, but because you've earned it. You've shown integrity when everyone else around you showed greed. I shook my head. I didn't do any of this for money. I know, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. That's exactly why you deserve it. The fallout was immediate. Within days, word spread that Albert had rewritten his will. Lydia was furious. She called Albert's attorney repeatedly, threatening lawsuits. None of it mattered. The paperwork was airtight. Anne spiraled. Her cards were frozen. Her accounts drained. Her ventures collapsing. One night, she sent me a long, rambling message online, begging for help. She said she was pressured into everything, that she never meant for it to go this far, that she was just trying to protect the family. I deleted it without replying. Even after I blocked him, he kept calling from new numbers. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails swinging between rage and desperation. In one, he shouted that I had turned Albert against his own son. In another, he begged me to talk. I didn't respond. In under 2 weeks, Albert called again. It's done, he said simply. The trust is finalized. They're cut off. I asked how my father took it. He's furious, Albert said, but he still doesn't see why it's happening. He blames everyone but himself. Lydia's talking divorce, and Anne's drowning in debt. A week after Albert finalized the trust, the shockwaves began. At first, nothing obvious changed, just a shift in tone when my father's name came up. Calls stopped being returned, meetings were rescheduled, and people he once called friends suddenly became too busy. It was the kind of silence that always comes before everything falls apart. Within 2 weeks, the first cracks appeared. Word of the trust changes had reached the firm, and whispers spread through the legal community. An internal audit followed. It was called routine, but everyone knew why it was happening. Investigators dug into records, and soon enough patterns started to emerge. Forged signatures, unapproved transfers, missing funds. Nothing had gone public yet, but the writing was on the wall. By the second month, the situation exploded. The media caught wind, and the headlines were brutal. Top attorney's family linked to financial misconduct. Investigation launched into Alvarez Holdings. Every detail of their scheme came to light. Lydia's name was tied to embezzlement. Anne's influencer brand was exposed as a shell company, and my father's reputation, built over decades, was shredded in days. The firm suspended him pending investigation. State regulators opened a case. Clients cut ties. People he once mentored wouldn't return his calls. The man who once terrified courtrooms suddenly had no one in his corner. The third month was worse. Creditors called daily. Accounts were frozen. Sponsorships vanished. Anne's projects collapsed one after another, and Lydia's carefully curated image crumbled. Charity galas, high society dinners, exclusive circles, gone. Around that time, Albert's lawyers started the process of reclaiming the family home. It would take time, but the outcome was inevitable. By the 5th month, humiliation became public. When the eviction notice arrived, Anne completely lost it. She stormed onto Albert's property, screaming that he was destroying the family. Albert listened quietly before cutting her off with a single sentence. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't drain accounts or frame their own blood. This is the result of your choices. The house went on the market weeks later. Anne's luxury SUV was repossessed. Lydia was photographed shouting at debt collectors, and the pictures went viral. The family that had obsessed over appearances had become a public spectacle. Anne tried one last time to salvage her image. She launched a second-chance rebrand online, crying on camera about growth and learning from mistakes. It failed instantly. Sponsors vanished, followers disappeared, and she quietly deleted everything. Lydia fared no better. With no money and no one willing to associate with her, she faded from the social world she once ruled. By the 6th month, Lydia filed for divorce. She accused Stephen of emotional neglect and betrayal, hoping for a payout. But Albert's lawyers had sealed every loophole. The accounts were frozen, the trust was untouchable, and there was nothing left for her to win. Steven's professional life was over too. No firm would hire him. His name was toxic. The man who once preached control now had none. He left me a voicemail I never answered. "She left," he said quietly. "I gave them everything." I listened once before deleting it. He still didn't understand. He had given them everything instead of me, and now he had nothing. By the 8th month, they were unrecognizable. Anne was working retail for minimum wage. Lydia was selling overpriced skincare online. Stephen, stripped of wealth and reputation, was living alone in a small, rundown apartment. I saw him once by accident in a grocery store. He looked older and smaller, like the weight of every decision he'd made had finally caught up with him. He tried to speak, but I kept walking. There was nothing left to say. Albert seemed lighter when we spoke. "It was hard to watch," he admitted one afternoon. "But sometimes the only way to stop rot is to let it collapse under its own weight." He was right. Neither of us had destroyed them. We hadn't needed to. They had done it to themselves, one selfish decision at a time. Their downfall wasn't loud or dramatic. It was slow, humiliating, and final. And for the first time since I was 17, I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Life after their collapse was quiet, almost unnervingly so. For the first time in years, there were no angry messages, no manipulation, no guilt tripping, just silence. And in that silence, I began building a life that had nothing to do with them. I cut off every point of contact, changed my number, stopped checking the old email, and told relatives I didn't want updates. It wasn't about revenge. I just didn't want their chaos bleeding into the future I was trying to create. Work became my focus. The degree I'd fought for finally paid off, and I moved quickly through the ranks at a cybersecurity firm. I led projects, hired my own team, and earned the respect I'd once begged for. Every milestone felt like proof that I had built something entirely on my own. I traveled too, not to escape, but to live. From the temples of Kyoto to the mountains of Patagonia, every new place reminded me how far I'd come from that night I sat in my freezing car on Christmas Eve. The boy who once had nowhere to go was now writing his own story. Albert and I grew closer. He wasn't just my grandfather anymore. He was my anchor. We spoke often about the future of the family business, and for the first time, I was part of that future. "They tried to break you," he told me one evening, "but you built yourself stronger than they ever were." Almost a year later, a letter arrived. It was from my father. The handwriting alone stopped me cold. Inside, he admitted everything: the betrayal, the lies, the blindness, and said the words I once thought I'd never hear: "I'm sorry." He wrote about how Lydia had remarried and left without a word, how Anne barely spoke to him, how empty life had become. He said he wished he could go back and change it all. I read it twice, then I put it away. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because I no longer needed anything from him. Not an apology, not a conversation, not a relationship. I'd already forgiven him in my own way. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. That winter, Albert and I hosted a small holiday dinner. Marianne came, along with cousins and a few close friends. It was warm and full of laughter, the kind of evening I used to dream about when I was younger. At one point, Marianne raised her glass and said, "Here's to second chances, the ones we give ourselves." Her words stayed with me. My story was never about revenge. It was about rebuilding after being broken. It was about proving that their choices didn't define who I became. I haven't spoken to my father since that letter. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. If I do, it will be my choice, not his. The boy he threw out on Christmas Eve is gone. What's left is a man who built a life without their approval, who learned that family is about loyalty and love, not blood. And that man, the one they tried to destroy, is finally free. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. My father told me I'd fail at everything I ever tried, because I didn't have what it takes, and I should give everything to my golden brother, because he has what it takes. I tried anyway and succeeded despite him. Now he begs me to give my brother a job at my company. So my dad spent my entire childhood telling me I was going to fail at life. Not in a concerned parent way where they're worried about you. No, this was the full-on convinced, written-in-stone prophecy kind of certainty. He'd look at me doing homework or practicing for sports and just shake his head like he was watching someone try to teach a goldfish calculus. Meanwhile, my younger brother Logan could literally fart, and my dad would applaud his entrepreneurial spirit. I wish I was exaggerating, Let me paint you a picture of how ridiculous the favoritism was in my house growing up. I'm talking about levels of golden child worship that would make the most biased parent look fair and balanced. Every single thing I did got scrutinized and criticized, while Logan could mess up catastrophically and still get praise for trying his best. I was 12 when I built my first computer from parts I saved up for by mowing lawns all summer. Took me 3 months of work, research, watching YouTube tutorials, the whole deal. When I finally got it running, my dad walked into my room, looked at it, and said it was a waste of time because I'd never make anything of myself with computers anyway. That same week, Logan brought home a C- on a spelling test and got taken out for ice cream because he really applied himself this time. The kid spelled because as because and got ice cream. I built a functioning computer from scratch and got told I was wasting my time. This pattern continued through my entire childhood and teenage years. When I made the varsity basketball team as a sophomore, my dad told me sports were a distraction and I should focus on more realistic goals. When Logan quit the JV team after 2 practices because it was too hard, my dad praised him for knowing his limits and not overextending himself. When I got a 3.9 GPA my junior year while working 20 hours a week at a local restaurant, my dad said grades didn't matter because I didn't have the personality to succeed anyway. When Logan barely scraped by with a 2.3 and 0 job experience, my dad said grades weren't everything and that Logan had natural charisma that would take him far in life. The double standards reached absurd levels. I saved up money from my restaurant job to buy a used Honda Civic when I turned 17. Paid for it myself, handled the insurance myself, did basic maintenance myself. My dad's reaction was to tell me I'd probably run it into the ground within a year because I didn't know how to take care of things. Logan turned 17 and my dad bought him a newer car. Not new, but a solid used Toyota that cost 3 times what I paid for my Civic. When I pointed out the unfairness, my dad said Logan needed reliable transportation for his future career. I apparently didn't need reliable transportation despite working and going to school. Birthday celebrations were another joke. My birthdays got acknowledged with a card and maybe a small gift card to somewhere generic. Logan's birthdays were events. Full family dinners at nice restaurants, multiple presents, the whole production. One year my dad spent almost $600 on Logan's birthday celebration. That same year, I got a $50 bill and a card and a handshake. When I joined the school's robotics team and we won a regional competition, my dad couldn't even be bothered to show up to the awards ceremony. Too busy with work, he said. When Logan participated in a debate tournament and lost in the first round, my dad took the day off work to watch and then took Logan out for a consolation dinner at his favorite steakhouse because he was so proud of Logan for getting up there and trying. The message was crystal clear from every interaction. I could achieve anything and it wouldn't matter. Logan could fail at everything and he'd still be the favorite. It wasn't about what we did. It was about who we were in my dad's eyes. And in his eyes, Logan was destined for greatness, while I was destined to be mediocre at best. The natural charisma my dad kept talking about was basically Logan being able to talk his way out of consequences. The kid could charm his way out of a speeding ticket, a failed assignment, or pretty much any responsibility. And my dad ate it up like it was some kind of superpower instead of just being a good liar. Here's what really killed me though. When I was 16, I started a small lawn care business. I bought a used mower with money I'd saved, printed flyers at the library, and went door to door in our neighborhood. Within 2 months, I had 15 regular clients and was making decent money for a teenager. I was incredibly proud. Finally did something my dad couldn't criticize, right? Wrong. My dad sat me down one evening and told me I needed to shut down my business and give my client list to Logan. Not ask Logan if he wanted to partner up. Not suggest we work together. Give him my entire business. His reasoning? Logan had the right personality for running a business, and I was just doing grunt work anyway. He said I should focus on getting a regular job somewhere, because entrepreneurship wasn't in my DNA. But Logan was a natural-born leader who needed the opportunity to shine. I was 16 years old, had built something from nothing, and my own father wanted me to hand it over to my 14-year-old brother, who had never shown interest in working a single day in his life. When I refused, my dad grounded me for being selfish and not supporting my family. Grounded. For not giving away my own business that I built. That was the moment I realized my dad wasn't just playing favorites. He genuinely believed Logan was better than me. It wasn't even about what we did or accomplished. In his mind, Logan was inherently superior and destined for greatness, while I was inherently inferior and destined to fail. Nothing I could do would ever change that perception. My mom wasn't much better. She just went along with whatever my dad said. If he said the sky was green, she'd nod and ask what shade of green. She never stood up for me, never questioned the obvious favoritism, never even acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, treating your kids completely differently might mess them up. Her philosophy was, your father knows best, even when his best was objectively wrong and borderline abusive. College application time was another nightmare. I had worked incredibly hard to maintain my grades while working and running my business. I had good SAT scores, solid extracurriculars, recommendation letters from teachers who actually respected me. I applied to several state schools and got accepted to all of them with partial scholarships. My dad's response? He told me I was wasting my time with college because I'd probably flunk out anyway. And even if I didn't, I'd never amount to anything because I lacked ambition and drive. This man looked at my report cards, my work history, my business, and somehow concluded I lacked ambition and drive. The mental gymnastics required for that conclusion could win Olympic gold. Then Logan started his senior year, and suddenly college was the most important thing in the world. My dad started talking about which schools Logan should apply to, how they'd make it work financially, how proud he was of Logan for wanting to pursue higher education. Logan, who had never expressed any interest in college before, and was barely pulling a 2.5 GPA. Here's where it gets even better. My dad told me I needed to take out student loans for my education because they couldn't afford to help me. Fair enough. Money's tight, I get it. Except 3 weeks later, my dad sat us both down and announced he'd been saving money in an education fund. For Logan, he had literally been putting money aside for years, specifically for Logan's college education, while telling me we couldn't afford to help with mine. The amount? Almost $40,000. $40,000 that he'd been secretly saving for the golden child while I worked multiple jobs and took out loans. When I pointed out how messed up that was, my dad said he'd made the investment in Logan because Logan had a better chance of making something of himself and bringing success to the family name. I was a lost cause who would waste any money they gave me. I moved out 2 weeks later, took my loans, my scholarships, my business profits, and got a tiny apartment near campus. My dad's parting words were that I'd be back within a semester, begging for help, proving him right about my inability to make it on my own. I told him I'd rather live in my car than ask him for a single thing ever again. College was brutal, but in a good way. I worked 30 hours a week, took a full course load, and somehow managed to keep my grades up. I had exactly zero social life. No parties, no spring breaks, no fraternity nonsense. Just work, class, study, sleep, repeat. My roommate used to joke that I was like a robot programmed for productivity. My typical day started at 5 in the morning. I'd study until 7, go to my first class, attend lectures until 1 in the afternoon, then head to my job at a local accounting firm where I did data entry and basic bookkeeping, work until 9 at night, come home, eat something quick, study until midnight, sleep for 5 hours, repeat. Weekends were for catching up on assignments and picking up extra shifts when I could. During my sophomore year, I started freelancing on the side. Web design, database management, anything I could do remotely with flexible hours. It wasn't much at first, just enough to cover groceries and gas. But I learned a lot and built up a portfolio of clients who actually valued my work. I taught myself SQL, Python, and database optimization through free online resources and library books. Spent countless nights working through tutorials and building practice projects. My first freelance client was a small medical office that needed their patient database reorganized. I charged them $800 for something that took me about 20 hours. They were thrilled with the results and referred me to 3 other practices. By junior year, I was making almost as much from freelancing as I was from my regular job. The freelancing was also way more interesting and taught me actual marketable skills instead of just mindless data entry. I started thinking seriously about what it would take to do this full-time after graduation. Meanwhile, Logan started college at a fancy private school that cost 3 times what my state school did. My dad was so proud, posted pictures all over Facebook of Logan on campus, Logan at orientation, Logan in his dorm. The whole 9 yards of embarrassing parent behavior. I wasn't even mentioned in the family updates. It was like I didn't exist. The few times I did talk to my parents during college, the conversations followed the same pattern. My dad would ask how school was. I'd say fine. He'd grunt with apparent disinterest, then launch into a 20-minute speech about how well Logan was doing and all the amazing opportunities he was pursuing. Never mind that I was working myself half to death while maintaining good grades. Logan taking a full course load of easy electives was apparently more impressive than my engineering coursework combined with full-time employment. Logan lasted exactly 1 year before getting kicked out for academic dishonesty. Turns out his natural charisma didn't extend to actually doing his own work. He'd been paying other students to write his papers, and got caught when he submitted one that had someone else's name still in the file properties. $40,000 down the drain for 1 year of plagiarism and failing grades. My dad's response? Boys will be boys. Everyone makes mistakes. Logan just needed to find the right path. He framed it like Logan was some kind of misunderstood genius who just hadn't found his calling yet. Zero accountability for the fact that Logan had cheated, lied, and wasted enough money to buy a new car. Logan moved back home and started what my dad called his entrepreneurial phase. In reality, it was a series of failed business ideas that my dad funded while Logan did minimal actual work. First, it was a clothing line. My dad gave him $15,000 to get started. Logan designed exactly 3 shirts, sold maybe 20 of them to friends and family, then lost interest when he realized running a business required consistent effort. The clothing line was supposed to be streetwear targeted at college students. Logan made a bunch of grand plans about partnering with influencers and getting into retail stores. He spent most of the money on a professional photo shoot for the 3 designs he made, bought expensive branding consultation that he didn't follow through on, and blew the rest on sample inventory that sat in boxes in my parents' garage for years. When the business inevitably failed, my dad blamed the saturated market and bad timing instead of Logan's complete lack of effort. Next was a social media management company. My dad bought him a new laptop, paid for online courses, even helped him set up an LLC. Logan made an Instagram account for the business, posted twice, then forgot about it. The LLC dissolved after a year of inactivity. This one was even more pathetic because Logan actually landed 2 small business clients through family connections. A friend of my dad's who owned a local restaurant, and my mom's cousin who ran a boutique. Both were willing to pay Logan to manage their social media. Logan posted for them maybe 3 times total, then stopped responding to their messages. My dad had to apologize to both of them and return their deposits. Logan's excuse was that social media management was too restrictive for his creative vision. Then it was a food truck. This one my dad really invested in. Dropped $30,000 on a used truck and equipment. Logan was going to sell gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches. He operated for exactly 2 weeks before deciding it was too much work, getting up early, and dealing with permits and food safety regulations. The truck sat in my parents' driveway for a year before they sold it at a huge loss. The food truck phase actually overlapped with me starting my company, which made the contrast even more obvious. Logan would wake up at 11, make some grilled cheese sandwiches around noon, park the truck at the same spot downtown for a couple hours, then go home by 3. He complained constantly about how hard it was and how demanding customers were. Meanwhile, I was working 14-hour days, building my client base and developing systems to scale my business. But according to my dad, we were both entrepreneurs working hard to make our dreams reality. After the food truck failure, Logan announced he was going to become a day trader. My dad gave him $10,000 to invest. Logan took 1 online course, bought access to some trading platform, and proceeded to lose $8,000 of it within 3 months through incredibly stupid trades. He'd follow random tips from Reddit forums and YouTube videos, make impulsive decisions based on nothing but gut feeling, and then act surprised when he lost money. The remaining $2,000 he withdrew and spent on clothes and eating out. Every single failure was met with encouragement and more money. Logan wasn't a serial failure with no follow-through. No, he was a passionate entrepreneur exploring different ventures until he found the right fit. My dad kept telling anyone who would listen that Logan had the mind of a true businessman and just needed to find his niche. During this time, I graduated college with honors, landed a job as a database administrator for a logistics company, making decent money. Within 3 years, I'd worked my way up to senior analyst. I was good at what I did, and I was finally making enough to live comfortably and pay down my student loans aggressively. But I had bigger plans. I'd been freelancing the entire time, building relationships with clients, learning what businesses actually needed. I saw a gap in the market for mid-sized companies that needed database optimization and automation, but couldn't afford the big consulting firms. At 27, I quit my job and started my own consulting company. Used my savings to float myself for 6 months while I built up my client base. It was incredibly risky. I had sleepless nights wondering if I'd made a massive mistake. But I hustled. I networked. I delivered exceptional work and let my results speak for themselves. Those first 6 months were terrifying. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning panicking about making rent, wondering if I should just give up and find another regular job. Every day I didn't land a new client felt like confirmation that maybe my dad was right all along. But I pushed through it. Cold called businesses, attended every networking event I could find, undercharged for my first few projects just to build a reputation. My first major client was a regional logistics company that was struggling with their warehouse management database. Their system was a mess of redundant entries, outdated information, and zero automation. I spent 2 months completely rebuilding their database structure, implementing automation for routine tasks, and training their staff. Cut their processing time by 40% and reduced errors by even more. They were so impressed they referred me to 4 other companies in their industry. Year 1, I made $70,000 in revenue and paid myself about $40,000 after expenses. Barely more than my old job, but I was my own boss. Year 2, I hit $150,000. Hired my first employee, a recent graduate named Alex, who reminded me of myself at that age. Hardworking, eager to learn, willing to put in the hours. Year 3, I broke $300,000 and brought on 2 more people. By year 5, I was running a team of 12 with annual revenue over $2 million. The growth wasn't smooth or easy. Had plenty of setbacks along the way. Lost a major client in year 3 when they got acquired, and the new parent company used their own systems. Had an employee steal client data and try to start a competing business in year 4. Dealt with cash flow problems more than once when clients paid late while I still had to make payroll. But I figured it out each time. Found new clients to replace the ones I lost. Implemented better security protocols after the data theft. Set up a line of credit to handle cash flow gaps. Each problem made the business stronger and taught me something valuable about running a company. I was 32 years old running a successful business that I'd built from scratch with zero help from my family. Actually, less than zero help. I built it despite my family actively telling me I'd fail. And you know what? That made it so much sweeter. By this point, I'd moved into a nice apartment in a good part of town, drove a reliable newer car that I paid cash for, had a healthy retirement account growing, and was living comfortably without debt except the mortgage on a small rental property I'd bought as an investment. Everything my dad said I'd never achieve, I'd achieved. Everything he said I couldn't do, I'd done. My dad knew vaguely that I had my own business. I'd mentioned it once or twice during the obligatory holiday phone calls. His response was always the same dismissive grunt and subject change. He never asked questions, never showed interest, never acknowledged it as a real achievement. In his mind, I was probably running some tiny operation out of my apartment, barely scraping by. Meanwhile, Logan had moved on to his latest venture, a podcast. Because apparently everyone and their dog needs a podcast now. My dad bought him all the equipment, paid for hosting, even hired someone to teach Logan how to edit audio. Logan recorded 6 episodes total over 4 months, got maybe 100 downloads combined, then abandoned it when he realized building an audience required consistency and actual content worth listening to. I hadn't seen my family in person in almost 4 years. We did the obligatory phone calls on major holidays where conversations were surface level and uncomfortable. My dad would ask how work was. I'd say fine, he'd grunt, then spend 20 minutes telling me about Logan's latest genius idea. I'd listen, say nothing, and count down the minutes until I could hang up. Last Thanksgiving, I was actually grateful for food poisoning because it gave me a legitimate excuse to skip the family dinner. That's how much I dreaded seeing them. I'd rather spend the holiday vomiting than sit at a table with people who thought so little of me. 3 months ago, everything changed. I was in my office reviewing quarterly numbers when my assistant told me I had a visitor who claimed to be my father. I actually thought she was joking at first. My father showing up unannounced at my office made 0 sense. But sure enough, there he was in the lobby, looking older than I remembered, wearing slacks and a button-down like he was attending a job interview. He seemed surprised when my assistant led him through the main work area where my team was busy at their stations. I could see him looking around, taking in the office space, the equipment, the employees. We went into my private office. I didn't offer him a seat or any pleasantries, just stood there waiting for him to explain why he was here. The silence stretched out uncomfortably until finally he cleared his throat and said he wanted to talk to me about an opportunity. An opportunity. Right. He started with small talk, asking how business was going. I gave him one-word answers. Good. Fine. Busy. He commented on the nice office space. Said it looked like things were going well for me. I didn't respond. Just waited for him to get to the real reason he was here. Turns out, Logan's latest venture had crashed and burned spectacularly. He'd convinced my dad to co-sign on a loan for $45,000 to start a dropshipping business. You know, that thing that was already oversaturated and basically a scam by the time Logan decided to get into it. He'd spent the money on inventory that never sold, on ads that never converted, on a course taught by some guru who promised easy money. My dad explained all this like it was a tragic accident beyond anyone's control. The market was too competitive. Logan got bad advice from his mentor. The timing was unlucky. The inventory suppliers weren't reliable. On and on with excuses for why it failed, never once mentioning that Logan had no business plan, no market research, and no work ethic. The business folded within 8 months. Logan defaulted on the loan. Now my dad was on the hook for $45,000 plus interest that he couldn't afford. He'd already refinanced his house once to cover previous investments in Logan's failed ventures. He couldn't do it again. My dad sat in my office and told me this whole sob story about how Logan had tried so hard, but the market was just too competitive. How Logan was discouraged and struggling. How they needed help getting back on their feet. Then came the real reason for the visit. He wanted me to give Logan a job at my company. Not just any job, a management position. Because Logan had so much business experience from running his various ventures and could really contribute to the growth of my company. I actually laughed out loud. Couldn't help it. The audacity was breathtaking. "You're joking," I said. He looked genuinely confused. Why would I be joking? Logan has experience running businesses. He understands entrepreneurship. He could be a real asset to your team. Logan has experience failing at businesses, I corrected. That's not the same thing. My dad's face darkened. He's learned from those experiences. That makes him valuable. He knows what not to do. So do I replied. I know not to hire people who quit when things get difficult. I know not to hire people who've never successfully completed a single project. I know not to hire people just because they're related to me. He tried a different approach. Talked about how family businesses are stronger because of the trust and loyalty involved. How Logan would be committed to the company's success because it would be family success. How this could be an opportunity for us to rebuild our relationship while also helping Logan get back on his feet. The whole pitch was clearly rehearsed. He'd probably practiced it on the drive over, but it was full of holes. What trust? What loyalty? We didn't have any family relationship to rebuild because we never had a real one to begin with. My dad looked offended. He said family should help family, that I had resources now and Logan needed opportunity, that it was the right thing to do. He actually used those words. The right thing to do. Like giving Logan a management job he wasn't qualified for at a company he'd played no role in building was some kind of moral obligation. I asked my dad if he remembered telling me I'd fail at everything I tried. If he remembered saying I didn't have what it takes. If he remembered making me give my lawn care business to Logan, because Logan was the natural-born leader. If he remembered the $40,000 he saved for Logan's education while I took out loans. If he remembered any of the years of being told I was the lesser son who would never amount to anything. His face went red. He said that was in the past, and I needed to stop living in it. That he'd always supported both his sons equally. That I was being petty and vindictive by bringing up old grievances. The sheer revision of history was stunning. In his mind, he'd been father of the year to both of us. I told him no. Simple as that. No, I wouldn't give Logan a job. No, I wouldn't bail them out. No, I wouldn't be providing any help whatsoever. My company was built on my own merit with my own effort, despite everything my family did to discourage me. Logan wasn't qualified to work here, and even if he was, I wouldn't hire him. My dad's whole demeanor changed. The fake friendly act dropped. He told me I was being selfish and cruel, that Logan was my brother and family sticks together, that I owed them after everything they'd done for me growing up. He actually said I owed them. For what? For telling me I'd fail? For favoring my brother in every possible way? For making me feel worthless my entire childhood? I asked him to leave. He refused. Started raising his voice about how I'd turned my back on family, how success had made me arrogant, how I'd regret this. I called security, watching 2 guys escort my own father out of my building, while he shouted about what an ungrateful son I was, might have been the most surreal moment of my life. He called me 17 times that day. I blocked his number. He showed up at my apartment building that evening. The doorman turned him away. He sent emails. I sent them to spam. He tried to reach me through LinkedIn of all places. I blocked him there too. Then Logan started trying. Text messages about how he really needed this opportunity, how he'd changed and grown, how he'd work hard and prove himself if I just gave him a chance, how he knew we'd had our differences growing up but we were adults now and could move past it. Every message was clearly crafted to push emotional buttons. I didn't respond to any of them, not a single one. What was there to say? No amount of carefully worded manipulation was going to change the fact that Logan had been handed every advantage while I got criticism and obstacles, and he still managed to fail at everything while I succeeded. My mom started calling, crying about how I was tearing the family apart. How could I be so heartless to my own brother who was struggling? Didn't I care about family? I reminded her that she'd stood by silently while my dad treated me like garbage for 18 years and funded Logan's every whim while I worked multiple jobs. She hung up on me. The harassment continued for 2 weeks. Different phone numbers, emails from accounts I hadn't blocked yet, even a handwritten letter delivered to my office. All variations of the same theme. Logan needed help. I had the power to help. Family helps family. I was being selfish. I owed them. On and on. I finally responded with a single email sent to all 3 of them. Kept it short and clear. I had no interest in rekindling any relationship with people who had spent decades making me feel worthless. Logan's failures were not my responsibility. Their financial problems were not my responsibility. I wished them the best, but wanted no further contact. Any additional attempts to reach me would be considered harassment and handled accordingly. The email seemed to work. The messages stopped. I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the picture and would leave me alone. Should have known better. 2 months later, Logan showed up at my office. Just walked right in during business hours. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed past her and barged into my office during a meeting with a client. Started this whole scene about how he needed to talk to me, how it was urgent, how I couldn't just ignore family. I excused myself from the meeting, walked Logan to the lobby, and told him in no uncertain terms that if he ever showed up at my office again, I'd have him arrested for trespassing. He tried to grab my arm, started crying about how desperate he was, how he had nowhere else to turn. I called security again. As they were escorting him out, he shouted that I'd regret this, that karma would catch up to me, that I'd end up alone and miserable. Pretty rich coming from a 30-year-old man who'd failed at everything he'd ever tried and was now begging his brother for a job at a company he'd played no role in building. I sent a formal cease and desist letter that afternoon. Had my attorney draft it. Made it crystal clear that any further contact from any family member would result in legal action. The letter outlined every incident of attempted contact, characterized it as ongoing harassment, and gave them explicit notice to stop. That finally did it. Radio silence for 3 weeks. I actually started to relax, thinking maybe they'd finally gotten the message. Then I got a call from my attorney. My dad had hired a lawyer and was threatening to sue me. The grounds? Some nonsense about how I'd stolen business opportunities that rightfully belonged to Logan because I'd used skills I learned while working at a family business. Except we never had a family business. The whole thing was completely fabricated. My attorney was almost amused. He said it was one of the most baseless claims he'd ever seen and that we could easily get it dismissed. But the point wasn't to win a lawsuit. The point was to harass me, to cost me time and money, to try to force me back into contact with them. We filed a motion to dismiss and a countersuit for filing a frivolous lawsuit and ongoing harassment. My attorney was confident we'd win both. He was right. The judge threw out their case within 3 weeks and ruled in our favor on the countersuit, ordered them to pay my legal fees plus additional damages for the harassment. The amount wasn't huge by any means, but it sent a clear message. Keep messing with me, and it'll cost you more than just pride. My attorney sent them the judgment with a note that any future contact would result in immediate legal action with penalties. That was 2 months ago. Haven't heard from any of them since. No calls, no emails, no surprise visits. Just blessed silence. Part of me wonders if they've finally accepted that I'm done with them, that the bridge isn't just burned, it's been napalmed and the ashes scattered, that no amount of guilt trips or manipulation or legal threats is going to change my mind. But I know my family. They're probably just regrouping, trying to figure out a new angle. Maybe they'll try to reach out through extended family. Maybe they'll try to show up at a professional event. Maybe they'll find some other creative way to insert themselves back into my life. Doesn't matter. I'm prepared now. I have lawyers on retainer. I have documentation of everything. I have boundaries made of reinforced steel. They taught me growing up that I was worthless and would never succeed. They were wrong about that. They taught me that family always comes first no matter what. They were wrong about that too. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong, though I definitely did that. The best revenge is living well and not letting them be part of it. My dad spent my entire childhood telling me I'd fail. He invested everything in Logan because Logan had what it takes. Now, Logan's living at home at 30 with a string of failed businesses and defaulted loans while I'm running a successful company that I built from nothing. And they want me to fix their mistakes, to give Logan the opportunities I had to create for myself, to forget decades of being treated like I was less than. to pretend like none of it mattered because family. Here's what I want people to understand about situations like this. Cutting off toxic family isn't cruel. It's not heartless. It's not something you do lightly or because you're being petty. It's an act of self-preservation when dealing with people who have proven repeatedly that they don't value you, don't respect you, and will only take from you. My dad had 32 years to be a good father to me. 32 years to show some basic fairness and respect. 32 years to acknowledge my efforts and accomplishments. He chose to spend those years tearing me down while building Logan up. That was his choice. Now I'm making mine. Logan had 30 years to be a decent brother, to maybe stand up for me occasionally when the favoritism got really bad, to treat me like a person instead of the inferior sibling. He chose to take advantage of every benefit he got while I got nothing. That was his choice. Now I'm making mine. My mom had 32 years to be a mother to both her sons instead of just enabling my dad's favoritism. She chose silent complicity. That was her choice. Now I'm making mine. They made their choices based on what benefited them in the moment. I'm making mine based on what's healthy for my future. And my future doesn't include people who see me as a bank account to raid or a resource to exploit when their golden child inevitably fails. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. My sister hired investigators to expose my fake success after I cut off my toxic family. Her plan backfired spectacularly. Hey Reddit, my sister hired investigators to prove I was lying about my successful life after cutting off my toxic family. She planned to expose me as a fraud at my grandmother's 85th birthday party. Their faces went absolutely white when the investigation report hit the table. Here's how it went down. The last time I saw my sister Victoria, she was smirking at me across our parents' mahogany dining table. Mom was sobbing into her napkin, while Dad's venomous words echoed through the room like they always did. I always knew you'd amount to nothing. That night, 5 years ago, was my breaking point. The final time I let my family make me feel utterly small and worthless. Mom, Hope, which is hilarious considering how little of that she gave me, pleaded between theatrical sniffles. Sweetheart, we just want what's best for you. If you'd just listen to Victoria about the job at her firm. I cut in, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the rage bubbling inside me. The entry-level admin position? The one where I'd be fetching her coffee? Victoria's perfect, infuriating smile didn't waver. Everyone has to start somewhere, little sister. Some of us just start higher than others. That familiar, agonizing knot in my stomach tightened. For 26 years, I'd been trapped in Victoria's shadow. She collected accolades. I collected criticisms. Every one of my achievements was weighed against hers and found lacking. Every single mistake I made became a family legend, whispered and retold at gatherings like folklore. Let me paint you a picture of what growing up in that house was like. When I was 8, I won the regional spelling bee. Studied for months, beat kids 2 grades older than me, came home with this huge trophy. You know what my parents said? That's nice, honey. Victoria just got accepted into the advanced math program. That was it. My trophy went on a shelf in my room where nobody saw it. Victoria's acceptance letter got framed and hung in the living room. When I was 15, I started coding. Taught myself from library books and free online courses. Built my first website for a local business and made $200. I was so proud. Thought maybe finally I'd done something they'd recognize. Dad looked at my work for maybe 30 seconds before saying, "That's cute. Victoria just got offered an internship at a law firm. Real career potential there." Every birthday, every Christmas, every single family gathering, the pattern never changed. Victoria was the star. I was the understudy who'd never get called to perform. The thing that really messed me up was how they'd use Victoria's success as a weapon against me. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the family motto. Didn't matter what I was doing or how hard I was trying. It was never enough because Victoria had already done it better, faster, or with more recognition. High school was brutal. Victoria had graduated valedictorian 3 years before I started. Every teacher knew her name. Every teacher compared me to her. "Oh, you're Victoria's sister. She was exceptional. Are you planning to follow in her footsteps?" Like I had a choice. Like I wasn't desperately trying to carve out my own identity while drowning in her shadow. I remember my guidance counselor looking at my college applications with this disappointed expression. "These are good schools, Bailey, but they're not quite Victoria level, are they? Maybe you should aim a bit higher." Never mind that I had a 3.9 GPA and killer extracurriculars. I wasn't Victoria, so I wasn't good enough. The worst part was watching Victoria soak up all the attention while treating me like I was invisible. She'd walk past me in the hallway at school and not even acknowledge my existence. But the second we got home, she'd be the perfect big sister, offering advice I didn't ask for, suggesting improvements I didn't need, constantly positioning herself as the one who had it all figured out while I was just stumbling through life. And my parents ate it up. "Your sister is just trying to help," they'd say when I complained about her condescending attitude. "She wants you to succeed." No, she wanted me to know my place. Big difference. College was supposed to be my escape. I picked a school on the opposite coast, determined to finally be someone other than Victoria's little sister. For 2 glorious years, I was just Bailey. Made my own friends, pursued my own interests, studied computer science because I loved it, not because someone told me to. Then Victoria decided to get her MBA at a school 20 minutes from mine. Suddenly, all those connections I'd built, all that independence I'd fought for, gone. She'd show up at my campus events, introduce herself to my professors, network with the career counselors I was working with, and everywhere she went, she'd mention she was my sister, like she was doing me a favor by associating with me. "I already have a job," I said quietly at that dinner table 5 years ago. "I'm doing well at a tech startup." My father, Glenn, swirling his drink, scoffed. "Playing with computers, you mean? Meanwhile, your sister is running charitable organizations, making real differences in people's lives." The irony of that statement, given what I know now, is almost funny. I couldn't help myself. I muttered, "Making differences in her bank account, you mean?" The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's perfect smile finally cracked. "What exactly are you implying?" she asked, her eyes flashing. Even then, some part of me must have known. Must have sensed that something about her perfect charity work didn't add up. The expensive clothes she wore to fundraising events, the luxury vacations she took as donor cultivation trips, the new car every year justified as necessary for representing the organization professionally. Before I could even respond, Mom swooped in. "Bailey, apologize to your sister, right now, after everything she's done for you." "Done for me?" I actually laughed. It sounded foreign, even to my own ears. What exactly has she done except make sure I never forgot my place? That was it. Dad slammed his glass down, the sound echoing through the room. "That's enough. You've always been jealous of Victoria's success. If you spent half as much time working as you do complaining—" "I work 60 hours a week," I yelled, standing up abruptly. "I'm leading development on a major project. But you've never once asked about it, have you?" "Sit down," Mom ordered, her voice sharp. "We're not finished." "Actually," I said, grabbing my purse, my hand shaking but my resolve hardening. "We are. I'm done being the family disappointment. I'm done watching you worship Victoria while treating me like I'm broken. I'm just done." Victoria, ever the manipulator, piped up with fake concern, dripping from every word. "Mom, Dad, she's just having another one of her episodes. Remember that time in high school when—" "Goodbye," I cut her off, already walking toward the door. "Don't try to contact me." Dad's voice, cold and laced with threat, followed me. "If you walk out that door, don't expect any help when you fail, and you will fail." I paused in the doorway, turning back for one last look. Mom's mascara-streaked face, Dad's rigid disapproval, Victoria's sickeningly satisfied smirk. They were a perfect family portrait, just as they always had been, with one glaring, unbearable imperfection. Me. "Watch me," I said, both a promise and a curse. Then I closed the door behind me. The first week after leaving was the hardest. I kept waiting for someone to call, to apologize, to tell me they'd overreacted and wanted to work things out. My phone stayed silent. Not a single text, not one voicemail, nothing. That's when I realized they weren't going to chase me. They were perfectly happy with their perfect little family of 3. I was the problem that had solved itself by walking out the door. So I threw myself into work with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy, but was definitely productive. The startup I joined was small, just 5 of us in a cramped office, surviving on ramen and energy drinks, and the conviction that we were building something revolutionary. We were developing project management software with AI integration before AI was the buzzword everyone threw around. My role started as a junior developer, but within 6 months I was leading the development team. Not because I was the best coder, though I was pretty good, but because I was the most driven. While everyone else went home at reasonable hours, I stayed, learned new frameworks, optimized our code, fixed bugs that nobody else wanted to touch. The founder, a guy named Trevor, pulled me aside one day. "Bailey, you're going to burn out if you keep this pace up." "I'm fine," I told him. And I was. Because every line of code I wrote, every problem I solved, every milestone we hit, it was proof that I was building something real. something they couldn't diminish or dismiss or compare to Victoria's achievements. Year 1 passed, then Year 2. The startup got funding. We moved to a real office with actual furniture instead of folding tables. Hired more developers. Started landing enterprise clients. And through it all, my phone stayed silent. I told myself I didn't care, that I was better off without them. Most days I believed it, but there were moments, birthdays, holidays, random Tuesday afternoons, when I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call mom, to share good news, to hear someone say they were proud of me. Then I'd remember that conversation. Remember Dad's voice telling me I'd fail. Remember Victoria's smirk, and I'd put the phone down. Year 3 was when everything changed. Trevor wanted to retire. He'd built the company from nothing, taken it as far as he could, and was ready to move on. He offered to sell me his shares for a price I couldn't actually afford. That's when Hugh entered the picture. We'd gone to MIT together, lost touch after graduation, reconnected at a tech conference. When I told him about the opportunity, he didn't hesitate. I've got savings. You've got vision. Let's do this. We bought out Trevor together. 50-50 partners in a company that was valued at $800,000 at the time. Seemed like an impossible amount of money. Seemed like we'd reached the peak. We had no idea. Year 4, we landed a contract with a major retail chain. They needed custom inventory management software that could integrate with their existing systems. It was complex, demanding, and exactly the kind of challenge I'd been waiting for. We delivered it 6 weeks early and under budget. Word spread. Suddenly, we were the company other companies wanted to work with. Revenue doubled, then tripled. We moved to a bigger office, hired 15 more people, started filing patents for our proprietary algorithms. Hugh handled the business side while I focused on development. It was the partnership I'd never had with my family, built on mutual respect, shared goals, and actual communication. Year 5 started with a magazine profile. Some tech journalist had caught wind of our growth and wanted to do a feature. I almost said no. The last thing I wanted was attention that might reach my family. But Hugh convinced me. Bailey, hiding your success doesn't make you humble. It just makes you invisible. The article ran in Tech Business Weekly. We got 100 new inquiries in a month. Investors started calling. One of them offered to acquire us for $12 million. We turned them down. This was our company, built on our terms, and we weren't ready to sell. That's also when Grandma Amy found out. She'd apparently subscribed to Tech Business Weekly years ago after Grandpa passed away. He'd been an engineer, and she kept the subscription as a way to feel connected to him. She saw my photo in the magazine and recognized me immediately. She didn't call right away, told me later she wanted to give me space. But she kept tabs, followed the company's growth, read every article, every press release, and she never told my parents. They don't deserve to know, she said when we finally talked. Not after what they did to you. 5 years passed, 5 years of absolute silence from them, but 5 years of building something they couldn't diminish. 5 years of becoming someone they wouldn't even recognize. 5 years of peace. Until my phone buzzed that morning with a message from my cousin Presley. Hey stranger, you're not going to believe this, but Grandma Amy's 85th birthday party is next month. The whole family's coming. Victoria's organizing everything, and she's planning something wild. She's been asking about you a lot. I stared at the message, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. Through my office window, I could see the city skyline, the same view that had graced magazine covers featuring my company, the same view my family would never believe I owned. Another message from Presley popped up. You should come. Show them who you are now. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something stopped me. Maybe it was time. Time to show them exactly who Bailey Francis had become while they weren't watching. My phone buzzed again. This time, a news alert. Tech innovator makes Forbes 30 under 40. My own face stared back at me from the screen. I'd insisted they omit my middle name for the article. My family never read tech news anyway. I thought of Victoria, so desperate to know what I'd been doing, planning something wild for Grandma's party. My sister always did love a good show. Well, I murmured to myself, a slow smile spreading across my face. Let's give her one. I typed a quick reply to Presley. Tell me more about this party. Someone's been poking around your socials, Hugh said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. And I don't mean the usual tech journalists. I minimized the quarterly reports on my screen. Let me guess, my sister? Not directly. Hugh leaned forward, lowering his voice even though we were alone in my office. But that cousin of yours, the chatty one who messaged you about the party? She told me Victoria's been showing everyone pictures of you outside some luxury condo in Manhattan. Interesting, considering you've never posted anything about where you live. Exactly. Hugh had been my right hand since the startup days, back when we were coding in a basement apartment. He knew everything, including why I kept my success hidden from my family. He'd been there for the late-night conversations when I'd admit how much it hurt that they never reached out. He'd been the one to remind me that their silence was their loss, not mine. She hired someone, Hugh said flatly. An investigator. I felt that same familiar chill, the one I used to get before family dinners. The one that said danger was coming and I needed to be ready. You're sure? Remember Justin from MIT Security? His wife works for an investigations firm in the city. She overheard your sister's name mentioned in a briefing. Apparently, Victoria hired them 3 weeks ago. Paid $5,000 upfront for a full background check and surveillance report. $5,000. Victoria was that desperate to prove I was lying that she'd spent $5,000 on an investigator. The pettiness was almost impressive. My phone buzzed. Another message from Presley. OMG, you have to hear what Victoria just told everyone in the family group chat. She says you've been lying about everything. Says she has proof you're not who you say you are. I showed Hugh the message. He whistled low. She's trying to set you up for something big at that party. Let her try. I stood up, walking to the window. 15 floors below, people looked like ants scurrying between skyscrapers. The view I'd worked so hard to earn. The view that proved I'd made something of myself without their help or approval. She wants to expose me? Fine. But she might not like what she finds. What are you thinking? Before I could answer, my assistant buzzed in. Miss Francis, your 2 o'clock is here. The venture capital meeting. Thanks, Karen. Hugh nodded, heading for the door, then paused. Just be careful, okay? I know that look. You're planning something. After he left, I opened my laptop and pulled up my private email. 3 new messages from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, all asking variations of the same question. Was it true? Had I really been pretending to be successful? Uncle Robert. Bailey, your sister is saying some concerning things about your situation. If you need help, you can call me. Aunt Michelle. Is everything okay? Victoria showed us pictures of where you're supposedly living. It doesn't look like the success story we'd heard. Cousin Todd. Dude, what's going on? Victoria's telling everyone you've been lying about your job. I clicked delete on all of them. These people hadn't cared about me in 5 years. They didn't get to suddenly act concerned now just because Victoria was spreading rumors. My phone rang. Grandma Amy's number. My finger hovered over decline, but something made me answer. Bailey? Her voice was warm, familiar. The only voice from that family that didn't make my stomach clench. I heard you might be coming to my party. I'm thinking about it, Grandma. Good, because I think it's time. She paused. Your sister's planning something dramatic, isn't she? Seems like it. Then you should come, she said firmly. Not for them, for you. And maybe a little for me. I'd like to see what you've become. You already know, don't you? She laughed, that warm sound I remembered from childhood. The sound that used to make me feel safe when everything else in that family made me feel small. I've known for 3 years. Ever since that article in Tech Business Weekly. You look just like your grandfather in that photo. Same determined eyes. Same stubborn set to your jaw when you're focused on something. My throat tightened. Grandpa had been the only other person in that family who ever believed in me. He'd passed away when I was 23, right before everything took off. You never said anything. You needed space to grow without them poisoning it. But now I think it's time they saw the truth. She paused. And Bailey, I'm proud of you. Your grandfather would be proud of you. You did exactly what he always said you would. You proved everyone wrong by being exactly who you are. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone. Then I pulled up my calendar. The party was in 3 weeks. That gave me just enough time to prepare. I called Hugh back into my office. Get Fletcher on the phone. Your lawyer? This is getting serious? Victoria wants to play detective? Let's show her what real investigation looks like. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Fletcher, my corporate attorney, was thorough to the point of obsession. When I told him what Victoria had been doing, hiring investigators, spreading rumors, planning some kind of public humiliation, his eyes lit up like I'd handed him the case of his career. Fletcher was in his 50s, looked like someone's friendly uncle, but had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in court. We'd worked together on several contracts over the years, and I'd learned to trust his instincts completely. Let me get this straight, he said, leaning back in his chair during our first meeting. Your sister hired someone to dig into your life, presumably to find dirt? That's the plan, seems like. And what exactly is she going to find? I smiled. A successful tech CEO with a clean record, 3 patents in software development, and a company valued at $12 million. So she's going to humiliate herself? He grinned. I love it. But let's make sure we're protected. I'm going to do some digging of my own. Into her. Into Victoria? If she's running a charity, there are public records, financial disclosures, tax filings. The whole thing is surprisingly transparent if you know where to look. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Let's just say I've seen this type before. People who use nonprofits as personal piggy banks. They think nobody's paying attention because it's charity work. I hadn't expected that. The comment I'd made 5 years ago about her bank account had been pure instinct, born from years of watching her expensive lifestyle and wondering how a nonprofit director afforded it. You think she's stealing? I think, Fletcher said carefully, that someone who's this desperate to tear you down probably has something to hide herself. People who are secure in their own success don't need to destroy others. They just live their lives. He started requesting documents. IRS Form 990s, which all nonprofits have to file publicly. Annual reports from Victoria's organization. Board meeting minutes. Financial audits. Everything was technically public record, but nobody ever bothered to look at it because, well, who investigates charity organizations? Fletcher looked, and what he found was damning. The first red flag was the expense reports. Victoria's charity supposedly helped homeless families find housing and job training. Noble cause. But when Fletcher pulled the financial statements, things didn't add up. The organization brought in about $400,000 a year in donations. Operating expenses were listed at $320,000, leaving $80,000 for actual program services. Look at this, Fletcher said during our second meeting, spreading documents across his conference table. She's billing the charity $15,000 a year for office space. Want to know where that office space is? The spare bedroom in her condo? Seriously? It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Travel expenses, $90,000 last year alone. For a local charity that operates within a 50-mile radius, she somehow needed to take trips to the Caribbean, Europe, and Hawaii. All first class. All 5-star hotels. He flipped through more pages. Consultant fees to 3 different LLCs, totaling $110,000 annually. I traced those LLCs. Want to guess who owns them? Victoria. Bingo. She's literally paying herself through shell companies. The charity pays consulting fees to businesses she owns, which then pay her directly. It's money laundering with extra steps. 2 days before the party, Fletcher called me into his office. The look on his face told me everything had gone from bad to worse for Victoria. You were right, he said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. Your sister's charity? It's a mess. She's been using it as a personal slush fund, overcharging for expenses, billing the charity for personal travel, even funneling money to shell companies she controls. I stared at the documents. Years of financial irregularities, all meticulously documented. I've already contacted the state attorney general's office, Fletcher continued. They're very interested. How bad is it? 6-figure embezzlement, maybe more. They're opening a formal investigation. The party was on a Saturday evening at the country club, the same one my family had been members of for 3 generations, the same one where Victoria had her debutante ball, the same one where I'd been told repeatedly, in subtle and not so subtle ways, that I'd never quite fit in with their crowd. I drove there in my Tesla Model S, the one with the custom paint job and premium interior, dressed in a designer suit that cost more than my parents used to spend on my birthday and Christmas combined. Hair professionally styled that morning. Confidence earned through 5 years of proving myself. Presley met me in the parking lot, her eyes going wide as I pulled up. Bailey? Oh my God, you look amazing! And holy crap, is that a Tesla? Thanks. I handed my keys to the valet, who looked at the car with obvious appreciation. His eyes went even wider when he saw the custom interior through the window. Victoria's been telling everyone you're broke, Presley whispered as we walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking on the pavement. She says you've been lying about everything, living in some terrible apartment in Queens, working minimum wage jobs at coffee shops. Is that what she's been saying? She's got this whole presentation planned, PowerPoint and everything. Says she hired some investigator who proved you're a fraud, spent weeks putting it together, even made a video montage of what she claims is evidence. Presley grabbed my arm. Bailey, I'm sorry. I should have warned you sooner, but I didn't think she'd actually go through with something this elaborate. Don't worry, I said, squeezing her hand. Let her do her presentation. I'm actually looking forward to it. The ballroom was decorated exactly how I remembered Grandma liked. Elegant, understated, with fresh flowers everywhere. White roses and orchids arranged in tall crystal vases. String quartet playing soft classical music in the corner. About 60 people milled around, most of them family members I hadn't seen in 5 years. The conversation stopped when I walked in. I could feel their eyes on me, hear the whispers starting. There she is! That's Bailey. I heard she's been lying about her life. Victoria's about to expose her. This is going to be awkward. Mom saw me first. Her face went pale, then red, then something I couldn't quite read. Maybe recognition that her daughter looked successful, despite their predictions. Maybe fear that Victoria's presentation might not go as planned. Maybe just surprise that I'd actually shown up. Dad was next to her, his expression hard and unyielding as ever. Same judgmental eyes I remembered. Same disappointed set to his jaw that said I'd never quite measure up. 5 years hadn't softened him at all. But it was Victoria who made the moment perfect. She was holding court near the bar, surrounded by relatives hanging on her every word. Designer dress that probably cost $5,000. Hair done professionally, makeup perfect. Every inch the successful daughter, the golden child, the one who'd done everything right. When she saw me, her mouth actually dropped open. For just a second, her mask slipped, and I saw genuine shock. Whatever she'd expected, a defeated woman showing up to defend herself maybe, or no one at all, it wasn't this. Not me looking confident and successful and completely unfazed by her grand plan. Bailey, she said, her voice carrying across the room, pitched loud enough for everyone to hear. You actually came. I'm surprised. The slight pause before surprised told me she'd meant to say something else, something cutting, but seeing me had thrown her off her script. Wouldn't miss Grandma's birthday for anything, I said, keeping my voice pleasant and neutral. No aggression, no defensiveness, just a granddaughter showing up for her grandmother's party. I walked past her toward Grandma Amy, who was sitting in a place of honor near the head table. Her eyes sparkled with something that looked like anticipation and pride. She'd known I was coming, known what Victoria had planned, and clearly had her own thoughts about how this evening would unfold. Happy birthday, Grandma. Bailey. She stood up, pulling me into a hug that smelled like her signature perfume, the same one I remembered from childhood, Chanel No. 5. The scent transported me back to better memories, rare moments of feeling valued in a family that mostly made me feel worthless. You look wonderful. Successful. Very successful. The emphasis on that last word wasn't accidental. Grandma knew exactly what Victoria had been saying about me. Thank you. Your sister's been very busy, she said quietly, just for my ears. Planning this party. Planning other things too. I heard. Good. She patted my hand. Then you know what's coming. And you're prepared? More than prepared. She smiled. That knowing smile that suggested she'd seen all of this coming from miles away. Then let's have dinner. I'm quite looking forward to dessert. The way she said it made it clear she wasn't talking about cake. Dinner was awkward in that special way only family gatherings can be. I sat at a table with Presley and some cousins who kept shooting me curious glances. The kind of looks that said they'd heard Victoria's stories, but weren't quite sure what to believe now that they'd seen me arrive in a Tesla wearing designer clothes. Mom and Dad were at the head table with Grandma and Victoria. I could see Victoria whispering to them urgently, see Mom's worried expression, Dad's anger building. He kept glancing my way with something between confusion and fury. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I was supposed to show up defeated, or not show up at all. My confidence had thrown off their entire narrative. Uncle Robert leaned over from the next table. Bailey, it's been too long. How have you been? 5 years of silence, and now he wanted to chat. Doing well, Uncle Robert. Really well. That's good. That's good. He looked uncomfortable. Your sister mentioned you'd been having some difficulties. Did she? I smiled. What kind of difficulties? Well, you know, career troubles, financial issues, that sort of thing. Interesting. Did she happen to mention where she got this information? He shifted in his seat. She said she'd hired someone to check on you, just to make sure you were okay, you understand. Family looking out for family. How thoughtful of her. The dinner courses came and went. Salad, soup, main course. Every few minutes I'd catch someone staring at me, whispering to their neighbor, clearly confused about the disconnect between Victoria's stories and my actual appearance. Victoria kept glancing at her phone. She'd set up a projector and screen at the front of the room, ready for her big presentation. I could see her checking her notes, rehearsing whatever speech she'd prepared. After dessert, Victoria stood up and tapped her glass. The room fell silent immediately. She had that kind of presence. Years of being the center of attention had taught her how to command a room. Everyone, thank you so much for coming to celebrate Grandma Amy's 80-year birthday. She's been the rock of our family for so long, and we're blessed to have her. Applause. Grandma smiled graciously, though I caught the slight roll of her eyes that suggested she knew what was coming. But, Victoria continued, her voice taking on a serious tone that made everyone lean forward slightly, there's something else we need to address tonight. Something that's been troubling our family for years. I felt the room's attention shift toward me. Subtle at first, a few glances, some shifted seats for better views. Then more obvious, as Victoria's pause stretched out for dramatic effect. My sister Bailey, she said, and there was something poisonous in how she said my name, like it tasted bitter in her mouth, has been telling people she's successful, that she runs a tech company, that she's made something of herself, that she lives in Manhattan in some luxury condo and drives expensive cars. Mom looked like she might cry. Dad's face was stone. Several relatives had their phones out, presumably ready to record whatever was about to happen. But I've always had my doubts, Victoria went on, pacing slightly like a prosecutor addressing a jury. You see, Bailey and I haven't spoken in 5 years. She cut off all contact with the family, refused to come to holidays, birthdays, any family gatherings. And whenever anyone asked about her, we'd hear these vague stories about her tech job and her success. But no proof, no verification, just rumors and claims. She paused for effect, letting the implication hang in the air, that I'd been lying, that I'd cut them off because I was ashamed, that the family had been right about me all along. So I hired a professional investigator to look into her claims, to find out the truth about what my sister has really been doing for the past 5 years, where she really lives, what she really does for work, whether any of her success story is actually true. She pulled out a folder, theatrical, just like everything else about her, and held it up for everyone to see. And what he found is interesting, I suggested, standing up calmly. Victoria faltered, her script interrupted. What? What he found is interesting, right? I walked toward the head table, every eye in the room following me. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor, the only sound in the suddenly silent ballroom. Because I'm very curious what a professional investigator discovered about my life when I wasn't looking. You want me to read it? Victoria's confidence was returning. She thought she'd regained control. Fine. Everyone should know the truth. She opened the folder with a flourish and began reading, her voice strong and clear. Bailey Francis, age 31, currently residing at... She stopped. Her eyes scanned the page rapidly, and I watched her face change colors like a sunset, pale to red, to something approaching purple. Currently residing where? I prompted gently. Currently residing in a luxury condo in Manhattan, valued at approximately $3.4 million. Her voice had gone quiet. The room had gone even quieter. Keep reading, I said. It gets better. Owner of TechBridge Solutions, a software company valued at... Her voice cracked slightly. Valued at? I prompted again. She looked up at me, then back at the paper. Her carefully practiced composure was cracking in real time. $12.2 million. The room erupted, relatives gasping, whispering, turning to each other in shock. Someone dropped their fork, the clatter unnaturally loud in the chaos. Keep reading, I said quietly. We're just getting to the good part. CEO and founder of TechBridge Solutions, Victoria read, her voice shaking now, her hands trembling enough that the paper rattled. Featured in Forbes 30 Under 40, 3 patents in artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. Estimated personal net worth? She stopped again, closed her eyes, opened them. Go on, I encouraged. Estimated personal net worth of $4.7 million. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw actual fear in my sister's eyes. Real, genuine fear. This can't be real. This has to be a mistake. Oh, it's real. I pulled out my phone and projected it onto the screen Victoria had set up for her presentation. My Forbes article filled the wall. My face, my company, my success. All of it verified and documented by one of the most respected business publications in the world. The room went completely silent. Not the anticipatory silence from before, but the shocked silence of people realizing they'd been spectacularly wrong about something. Surprise, I said softly. Mom was crying now. Real tears, not the theatrical ones. Dad looked like someone had punched him. Victoria just stood there, the folder hanging limply in her hand. You hired an investigator to prove I was lying, I continued, addressing the room now. But he did his job. He found the truth. I just wasn't the truth you wanted. Bailey, Mom started. No, I held up my hand. You don't get to talk. Not yet. For 5 years, I've been building this. Working 16-hour days, taking risks, failing and getting back up. And not once, did any of you reach out to see if I was okay, to ask how I was doing, to offer support. We thought, Dad tried. You thought I'd fail. You wanted me to fail, because that's what you'd been telling me my whole life, that I'd never be as good as Victoria, that I'd never measure up. I turned to Victoria. And you. You were so desperate to prove I was a fraud that you spent money hiring someone to investigate me. Did you ever stop to think that maybe I was telling the truth? That maybe I actually did succeed? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. But here's what's really interesting, I said, and nodded to Fletcher, who'd been standing quietly near the back. He walked forward, carrying his own folder. Everyone, this is my attorney, Fletcher Hall. He's been doing some investigating too. Victoria, would you like to tell everyone what he found? Or should I? All color drained from her face. What is this? Dad demanded. Fletcher opened his folder. For the past 18 months, Victoria Francis has been embezzling money from her charity organization. She's been billing personal expenses to the nonprofit, creating fake vendors, and funneling money into shell companies she controls. Current estimate of stolen funds is approximately $240,000. The room exploded again, this time with accusations, shock, and anger. Victoria's perfect reputation was crumbling in real time. That's not... I didn't... Victoria stammered. You didn't? Fletcher held up documents. Because I have receipts here for a Caribbean vacation charged to the charity. Business expenses for a charity that helps homeless families somehow included first-class flights to St. Bart's. Mom was sobbing now. Dad had gone from red to white to gray. The police are here, Fletcher said calmly. I was required by law to report the charity fraud once I discovered it. They've been building a case for weeks. Right on cue, 2 detectives entered the ballroom. They barely glanced at the birthday decorations as they approached our group. We're looking for Victoria Francis, one said, showing his badge. Mom whispered, looking at Victoria like she'd never seen her before. We know, the detective said. We just arrested her business partner in the parking lot. The room exploded again. Relatives gasping. Mom sobbing. Dad arguing with the detectives. Through it all, Grandma sat calmly, sipping her champagne. Well, she said to me quietly, was it worth the wait? I watched my parents rushing out to find Victoria. Watched my relatives huddle in shocked groups, sharing stories of how Victoria had borrowed money or made promises through her charity. I didn't want this, I admitted. You just wanted the truth, Grandma said. And now everyone has it. She stood up, commanding attention like always. This party is not over. My granddaughter, my successful, honest granddaughter, is finally home, and I want cake. Later, as servers cut the elaborate birthday cake Victoria had ordered, Presley brought me a glass of water. That was intense, she said. But you know what's crazy? No one's even surprised about Victoria anymore. They're all talking about you, about how they should have seen it. Seen what? That you were the strong one. The real deal. She clinked her glass against mine. Victoria tried to tear you down and exposed herself instead. That's some karma. My phone buzzed. A text from Hugh. News about your sister's arrest is hitting the business feeds. Want me to handle PR? No, I typed back. Let the truth speak for itself. Bailey. Dad's voice made me look up. He stood awkwardly, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Your mother and I are going to the police station. But first, I need to say... I cut him off. Save your apologies. They're 5 years too late. He nodded slowly, understanding finally showing in his eyes. You really did it, didn't you? Everything we said you couldn't do. No, I corrected him. Everything you never bothered to see me do. As he walked away, Grandma raised her glass in my direction. Around us, relatives were already shifting, adapting to the new family dynamic, one where Victoria wasn't the golden child and I wasn't the failure. Happy birthday, Grandma, I said, raising my glass in return. She smiled, that knowing smile that suggested she'd seen this coming all along. Oh, sweetheart, this is just the beginning. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. My wife believed her daughter's lies over my truth and kicked me out. 3 weeks later, she demanded an apology and compensation. I gave her divorce papers instead, and her daughter lost it. Hey, Reddit, I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but after everything that went down, I figured someone out there might need to hear this. It's a story about trust, lies, and what happens when the person you'd have done anything for decides you're the enemy. I'm not here for sympathy, just to share how I learned that sometimes the calmest revenge is walking away and never looking back. If you had asked me, Mike, 44 male, a year ago, who the most loyal person in my life was, I would have said my wife Eleanor without even thinking. We met when I was rebuilding my life, trying to get my business off the ground after a financial mess. When things got rough, she was the one who told me not to quit, who loaned me money from her savings without hesitation. I used to tell people I hit the jackpot marrying her. Then there was her daughter, 18 years old and living with us. I'll call her Maya. At first, I really tried. I took her out for dinner when she aced an exam, helped her get a part-time job, even taught her to drive. She'd smile and thank me, but there was always that distance. Like she was playing polite for her mom's sake. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with this blank look, and when I'd ask if something was wrong, she'd just shrug and say, "You're not my dad." I brushed it off. I figured it was normal for a young adult to feel weird about a stepdad stepping in, but she didn't come around. She grew colder, ruder. She'd roll her eyes when I talked, interrupt me mid-sentence, make small digs like, "Dad wouldn't have done it that way." And Eleanor, instead of calling her out, started defending her. "She's just stressed, Mike," she'd say. "Don't take it personally." Then came that night. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd just come home from a long client meeting, and the house was unusually quiet. I walked in and found Eleanor sitting on the couch, her hands clenched, eyes glassy. Maya was standing near the wall, pretending to look scared, but with that same fake innocence I'd seen 100 times before. Eleanor looked up at me and said, "We need to talk." Her tone didn't sound like my wife's. It was flat, formal. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" I asked. Maya started tearing up, voice trembling like she had rehearsed it. "I just can't live here anymore. He made me uncomfortable. What he did to me, it's not right." For a second, I actually thought I misheard her. "What?" I said quietly. Eleanor stood up. "Is that true, Mike?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so unreal. "Eleanor, are you serious right now? You think I—" Before I could even finish, she slapped me. Hard. My cheek burned. My ears rang. Her voice shook with rage. "How could you? How could you even think about doing that to my daughter?" I just stood there, staring at her, feeling everything inside me collapse. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "She's lying." But Eleanor wasn't hearing me. She stepped back, pointing toward the hallway. "Pack your things. You're leaving tonight." "Eleanor," I said, still holding my face. "I didn't touch her. I swear to you. She's trying to start something." She shook her head, eyes filled with disgust that didn't even look like hers anymore. "I don't want to hear it." Maya let out this shaky sob, like she was in a bad drama. Eleanor rushed to hug her, and I watched from across the room, frozen. The two of them stood there like I was some monster. "Please, Eleanor." I tried again, softer this time. "We've been together for years. You know me. You know me." But she didn't. Not in that moment. Her voice came out like ice. "You need to go before I call someone to make you leave." I stared at her for a long second, waiting for something to break. Some flicker of doubt. Some sign that she realized what she was doing. Nothing came. So I walked down the hall, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and started packing. My hands were shaking so bad I kept dropping things. I knew I had the right to stay, but I left to avoid giving them anything to twist. When I turned to leave, she was standing by the door, arms crossed, refusing to look at me. Maya stood a few feet behind her, still pretending to cry but with the faintest smirk on her face. That image stuck in my head, her fake tears, and that small, satisfied smile. I stepped outside, and before I could close the door, Eleanor said one last thing. "Don't contact us again." The door slammed. The sound of it echoed all the way down the street as I stood there in the dark, suitcase by my feet, realizing my marriage, everything I thought was solid, had just ended in one lie. And as I walked away from that house, all I could think was, she didn't even ask. No questions. No hesitation. No, tell me your side. Just judgment. I kept walking until my legs burned, the cold night air drying the last bit of warmth I had left in me. I didn't even know where I was going, just anywhere that wasn't there. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I landed on one name, Derek, my friend. I hadn't talked to him in a while, but I knew if there was one person I could count on, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. "Mike?" His voice was half asleep. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely steady. I need a place to stay, just for a few days." He didn't ask why, didn't hesitate. "Come over, doors open." That's all he said. Simple, solid. I showed up at his apartment about half an hour later, carrying my half-filled suitcase and whatever was left of my pride. When I walked in, he was sitting on the couch, no questions on his face, just quiet concern. He pointed to the couch. "Sit, you look like hell." I dropped the suitcase and sat down. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Everything in my head was tangled. I didn't even know how to start. Finally, I said, "Eleanor kicked me out." Derek frowned. Why? You two fight? She thinks I did something to her daughter. The words felt poisonous just saying them out loud. He stared at me for a second, trying to process it. What? She said I made her uncomfortable. Said I did something. Inappropriate. I shook my head, staring at the floor. I didn't. You know, I wouldn't. The silence stretched for a second, and I could feel my chest tightening. I was waiting for it. The doubt. The look people get when they think they're hiding judgment. But you can see it anyway. I started panicking. But Derek just sighed and leaned back. Mike, stop shaking. I believe you. I looked up at him, almost not believing what I'd heard. You don't even need to think about it? He nodded. I've known you since high school. You're a lot of things. Stubborn, quiet, sometimes too patient for your own good. But not that. Not ever. Something in me cracked right then. I hadn't realized how desperate I was to hear those words until they came out of his mouth. I nodded, staring at the floor, swallowing the lump in my throat. He got up and went to the kitchen. Couch is yours. Sheets are clean. You can stay as long as you need. That night, I barely slept. My head kept looping the same thought. She didn't even ask. The next morning, I woke up early, staring at the ceiling. I checked my phone out of habit. One message from Eleanor. Just 4 words. You're a monster. That hit harder than the slap. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. By noon, Derek was already up for work. But before leaving, he put a sticky note on the counter. Don't sit in this forever. Fix it. That's when I decided I needed to know what I was really dealing with. Not emotionally, but legally. If Eleanor was serious about cutting me out, I needed to protect myself. I found a small law office nearby and made an appointment. The lawyer, a middle-aged guy named Nate, listened while I explained everything. The accusation, the eviction, the silence. He didn't flinch. When I finished, he opened a file and asked, Do you know whose name is on the house deed? Both, I said. We bought it together. He nodded. And the business? The one you registered under her name? Half of it's mine, I said quickly. I helped her start it. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. Do you have proof of any of that? I kept receipts, bank transfers, emails. He looked up. Good. Keep them safe. You have rights here, Mike. You're not walking away empty-handed. Something about that sentence made me breathe for the first time in days. For a while, I'd been walking around like I'd lost everything. My home, my wife, my reputation. But now, for the first time, I felt a flicker of control. When I got back, Derek was sitting on the balcony with coffee. He looked at me, searching my face. You okay? I went to see a lawyer, I said. Turns out, she can't just erase me. I still have rights to the house and the business. He nodded slowly. Good. You needed to hear that. I sat beside him, staring out at the street. She told me not to contact her, I said quietly. And now she's telling people I'm a threat. Let her talk, Derek said. Truth has legs. Lies don't. I didn't answer, but for the first time in days, I actually believed that. That night, I stayed up again, but not from fear, from thought. I opened my laptop, started sorting through folders, finding every proof, every receipt, every record that tied me to what we built. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was a plan. Because if she wasn't going to give me a chance to defend myself, I'd make sure she'd regret not letting me speak. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Derek went to work early, and I spent my time cleaning up my side of things, sorting through documents, printing out records, and checking bank statements. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected a text from her saying she wanted to talk, but the screen stayed empty. Then, one afternoon, Derek walked into the living room, holding his phone. You should see this, he said carefully. He handed it to me, and there it was. A post from Maya, my stepdaughter. A picture of her smiling at a cafe, captioned, Finally safe from my stepdad. Some men hide their true colors well. No names, no tags, but everyone in our town would know exactly who she meant. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to comment, to shout the truth into the void. But Derek stopped me. Don't, he said. You reply once and you look guilty. Let your lawyer handle it. He was right. I called my lawyer, explained everything, and by the end of the day, a cease and desist letter was sent directly to Eleanor's email. The post vanished within 24 hours. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. My phone started buzzing with texts from people I hadn't talked to in months. Some were polite, pretending they were just checking in. Others went straight to it, asking if I had done something inappropriate. I could feel the judgment hiding between every word. The next morning, I went out to grab coffee. The barista, someone who used to chat with me every morning, barely made eye contact. 2 regulars at the corner table stopped talking when I walked by. That silent, heavy kind of attention followed me everywhere. By the end of the week, I had to delete my social media altogether. I couldn't look at the whispers anymore. Every time I opened a feed, I saw people liking Maya's photos or leaving little comments like, "Proud of you for speaking out." It was like being erased while still existing. A few nights later, Derek came home to find me sitting on the couch staring at nothing. "You're not going to win this online," he said quietly. "I'm not trying to," I answered. "But she's winning out there." He sat down across from me. "Then win where it actually matters." I nodded, and that's when I decided I was done waiting. I met my lawyer again the next morning. We talked about filing for divorce formally, but he said something that stuck with me. Don't rush it emotionally. Build your foundation first, then act. So I waited. I documented every message, every deleted post, every screenshot I could find. I kept my hands clean, my responses legal, my tone cold. And then, about 2 weeks later, Eleanor showed up. It was a Saturday. There was a hard knock on the door. Not polite, more like someone trying to prove they still had control. When I opened it, Eleanor was standing there, arms crossed, jaw tight. She didn't look calm. She looked like she'd practiced this visit in her head 100 times. "Are you really not going to fix what you did?" she said. No greeting, no hesitation. Before I even answer, she walked in on her own, eyes darting around the small apartment like she was trying to remind herself she was the victim walking into the criminal space. She didn't sit right away. She just stood there, clutching her purse like a shield. "You've been ignoring me," she said sharply. "After everything you did, you could at least have the decency to face it." "I've had nothing to say," I answered, keeping my voice even. That stopped her for a second. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her existence, then straightened her shoulders, ready to start the real performance. She folded her hands. "Look, Mike, we can put this behind us. I've had time to think, and I'm willing to reconsider everything. But there has to be accountability." "Accountability?" I repeated. She nodded, like she was explaining something obvious. "Yes, for what you did. I think it would help Maya heal if you apologized, and maybe provided some compensation for the emotional distress you caused her." For a second, I just stared at her, trying to process the words. She was sitting there, calm as ever, talking about compensation, like she was negotiating a refund. I didn't answer. She took my silence as defiance. Her eyes narrowed. "You can't just walk away from this, Mike. You can't pretend you didn't cause pain. You think running from it makes you innocent?" That was it. The mask slipped. The gentle tone was gone. Her voice rose, sharp and brittle. "You're manipulative, you know that? You're hiding like a coward." I waited for her to finish. When she finally stopped, breathing hard, I stood up, walked to the table, and picked up a sealed envelope I'd prepared days ago. I walked back to her and placed it on the coffee table. "What's this?" she asked. "Divorce papers," I said. The color drained from her face. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Her calm broke completely. "You're trying to destroy everything. You're going to ruin us both." I looked at her, steady. "You did that the night you believed a lie over me." For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then she grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. The door slammed so hard it rattled the frame. I stood in silence for a long time after that. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt steady. That was the moment I realized something had shifted. I wasn't begging for her to believe me anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to come to her senses. She'd made her choice. And now I was finally making mine. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him to go ahead. File the divorce officially. No more half measures, no symbolic envelopes, no waiting around for her to come to her senses. I wanted it done legally and cleanly. He scheduled a meeting for the afternoon, and I showed up with a backpack full of proof, receipts, old invoices, business transfers, everything that tied my name to hers on paper. When I laid it all out on the table, the lawyer gave a small nod. "You've got more documentation than most people bring in a year. This will hold." I watched as he organized it into neat piles, labeling each one. "The business," he said, tapping a folder, "is a 50-50 split. You funded her, worked in it, and your name's on the accounts. She can't deny that." It wasn't satisfying yet, but it was something. I left that office knowing I had a plan. Something solid that wasn't built on begging or emotion. By the end of the week, Eleanor was officially served. The papers went out, and for the first time, the silence broke. My phone lit up with messages, one after another. "How could you do this to me? You're ruining my life. We can still fix this if you stop now." I didn't reply. Not a single word. She must have realized I wasn't biting because the messages turned uglier. "You'll regret this. You think anyone will believe your side? Still nothing from me. 3 days later, she called 11 times in one afternoon. I let it ring every time. That's when I heard it. A sharp knock on the door. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was her. When I opened it, she was standing there in full performance mode. Red eyes, trembling lip, one hand on her chest like she was auditioning for pity. "You're destroying everything," she said the moment I appeared. "We built a life together, Mike. You can't just throw it away because you're angry." "I'm not angry," I said flatly. "I'm done." She stepped closer, her voice dropping lower. "Then stop the divorce. Please. Think about what we had. Think about the house, the business, about me." Her tone softened just enough to sound desperate, but I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. This wasn't love. It was damage control. "You made your decision the night you threw me out," I said quietly. "You didn't ask questions then. Don't ask now." She stared at me for a second, disbelief flickering across her face. And then, just like that, the fake calm shattered. "You're doing this to punish me," she shouted. "You're ruining my daughter's life, mine too. You think this makes you innocent?" I didn't move. "You ruined your own life, Eleanor." Her breathing got shallow, eyes wild. Then she screamed, sharp and sudden. "You hit me!" The words sliced through the room like glass. For a split second, I just stood there, stunned. My hands were at my sides. I hadn't even taken a step toward her. She screamed again, louder, like she wanted the neighbors to hear. "You hit me!" And that's when I heard a door open behind me. Derek stepped out of his room, eyes focused. He froze for only a second before saying, calm and steady, "No, he didn't. I saw everything. You're lying." Eleanor's face drained of color instantly. She hadn't known Derek was home. The room went quiet, except for her breathing. "You need to leave," Derek said firmly. "Now." She looked between us, me standing still, Derek glaring. And for the first time since this all started, she didn't have a script. Her lips trembled, then twisted into something bitter. "You'll regret this," she hissed, voice shaking. I didn't reply. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The silence after was thick. Derek rubbed his face and sighed. "She's losing control, man. Don't be alone with her again. That was stupid from your side." "I won't," I said quietly. I grabbed my phone, opened the recorder app, and dictated everything that had just happened. Time, date, exact words. Then I sent it straight to my lawyer with a short note. She tried to accuse me of hitting her. Derek witnessed it. The reply came within minutes. "Good move. Keep documenting everything. Don't open that door again without me or the police on standby." The next day, I met with the lawyer again. He added Derek's statement to my case file. He looked up from the notes and said, "She's trying to bait you. Don't give her anything. Let her dig her own hole." So that's what I did. By the end of the month, my lawyer called. "Everything's filed and accepted. The court date is confirmed." My lawyer said the county court moved fast on uncontested property cases. No kids involved, no ongoing disputes. He also negotiated a partial settlement with her side before the hearing, so the judge agreed to an expedited schedule. That night, I sat at my desk, the apartment silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. I looked at the neatly stacked folders in front of me. A month of effort, every document sharp and ready. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. Court date, 14th. "Be ready." I stared at the message, then typed back one line. "I've been ready since the night she lied." Then I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, "Let's see who still lies when it's under oath." 2 weeks later, that day came. The courthouse looked smaller than I remembered from pictures. I sat with my lawyer at the front bench, files stacked neatly between us. Across the aisle, Eleanor walked in. She looked like she was walking onto a stage. She didn't even look at me. She just walked straight to her seat, pretending I didn't exist. Behind her sat Maya, arms folded tight across her chest, glare sharp enough to cut glass. My lawyer leaned closer. "Stay calm. Let the documents do the talking." But I nodded once. I didn't plan on saying much anyway. My lawyer had already filed a motion about her earlier misconduct. She'd submitted a sworn declaration full of false statements and ignored discovery deadlines. The judge had warned her once about wasting the court's time. The judge entered, a firm voice calling for everyone to rise. The proceedings started fast. My lawyer opened with a short statement, outlining the marriage, the joint business, and the contributions I'd made. He placed a folder on the desk and said, "Your Honor, this file contains direct evidence of Mr. Jefferson's involvement in all financial and operational aspects of the business." He opened it like he'd been rehearsing for weeks. Inside were receipts, bank statements, signed transfers, all bearing both our names. When the judge turned to Eleanor, asking if she had any objections. She smiled faintly, confident at first. That business was mine. He just helped here and there, she said. Helped? My lawyer asked. You mean the funding, contracts, web management, and rent payments he covered from his personal account? She hesitated. That was temporary support. Temporary, my lawyer repeated, holding up another page. This transfer here, a $10,000 investment marked as capital contribution, signed by you. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Jefferson, that doesn't sound temporary. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time since I walked in, I saw her mask shift. We moved to the next part, the home and assets. My lawyer presented the mortgage statements, showing both signatures. Every time Eleanor tried to interrupt, the judge stopped her. Mrs. Jefferson, the judge said sharply at one point, if you can't provide evidence to the contrary, let's proceed with what's documented. Her fake confidence began to crumble. Her hand trembled when she reached for her water. At one point, she muttered, He's doing this out of revenge. And the judge replied calmly, I don't see revenge here. I see paperwork. Behind her, I could see Maya glaring, whispering things into her mother's ear every few minutes. She looked furious, restless, like she was waiting for a chance to lash out. When my lawyer presented the emails, exchanges between me and Eleanor discussing her business plans, she tried to play dumb. I don't recall writing those. My lawyer printed one enlarged copy and read it aloud. Quote, You've done so much for this business, Mike. I couldn't have started without you. That's your email address, Mrs. Jefferson? She froze. Yes, but that was before he turned on me. The judge didn't even respond. He just made a note. By the time the evidence list ended, the courtroom felt colder. My lawyer leaned back, confident, while Eleanor kept her eyes on the desk, pretending to flip through papers that didn't matter anymore. Then the judge asked one final question. Mrs. Jefferson, did you or did you not remove your husband from the marital home without any proof of wrongdoing? Her voice cracked. I had to protect my daughter. From what? The judge asked. You admitted under oath there was no police report, no investigation, and no witnesses. Correct? Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence said enough. We'll take a short recess before I issue my preliminary ruling. The judge stepped out, saying he'd take it under advisement and set a date for the following week. When he left, the room went quiet, except for the sound of Maya's whispering. Fast. Panicked. Eleanor rubbed her temples, shaking her head. For once, she didn't look angry. She looked small. I stood up and walked out into the hallway, feeling every ounce of tension drain out of me. It wasn't victory yet, but it was close enough to taste. I was standing by the stairs when I heard quick footsteps behind me. Maya's voice cut through the air like nails on glass. You think you've won? I turned slowly. She was glaring at me, shaking with anger. You're pathetic, she spat. You ruined everything. You took everything from her. I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. She took a step closer. You're greedy. You never loved her. You just wanted the money. I looked at her for a long moment before answering, calm and steady. Funny. I'm not the one who lied to ruin a marriage. That shut her up. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The confidence that always filled her eyes flickered for the first time. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clacking down the steps until the sound faded. I stood there, breathing slow. My lawyer walked out a few minutes later, phone in hand. Judge will finalize next week, he said. Looks good for you. You handled that perfectly. I nodded. I didn't have to handle anything. The truth handled itself. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I saw Eleanor through the glass door, still sitting there, shoulders slumped, face pale. For years, I thought silence was weakness, that staying calm meant losing. But standing there that day, I realized something different. Silence wasn't surrender. It was control. And for the first time since the night she threw me out, I finally had all of it. The following week felt strangely calm. My lawyer told me the judge's final ruling would be delivered soon, but I already knew which way it was going. The evidence was overwhelming. The silence from Eleanor's side was even louder. Then the fallout started. It began small, like cracks in a wall. A friend from our old neighborhood messaged me saying, people are asking questions about her posts. Someone mentioned, there's no proof of anything. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. A few days later, screenshots from Maya's old posts started circulating again, the ones she thought she'd deleted months ago. Someone found them through archived pages, reposting them in community groups with questions like, didn't this girl accuse her stepdad? Why's the court saying something else? The narrative flipped almost overnight. The same people who used to avoid me were suddenly silent. Some even reached out privately with awkward apologies. Then came the real explosion. Apparently, one of Maya's friends, someone she'd bragged to, leaked a series of messages. In them, Maya admitted that she might have exaggerated things about me because she couldn't stand how much control Mike had in the house. The screenshots spread fast. Every word was time-stamped. Every excuse was gone. My lawyer called me that morning. "Don't comment publicly," he said. "Let the truth breathe on its own. I didn't plan to. Watching it happen was enough." Eleanor's business took the first hit. Clients started pulling out of contracts, citing personal reputation concerns. By the end of the week, her company's social media page was flooded with questions. Not hateful ones, just cold curiosity. "Did you really lie about your husband?" She tried posting a vague statement about misunderstandings, but it only made things worse. People had already seen the leaked messages. There was no coming back from that. One evening, Derek and I were eating dinner when a mutual acquaintance sent me a video clip. It showed Eleanor and Maya leaving a small cafe. Mid-argument, Eleanor's voice carried loud and clear. "You ruined everything! You and your mouth." Maya fired back, "You believed me. You didn't even ask him what happened." The video ended with Eleanor shouting, "Because you cried." I just put the phone down. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice finally caught up to them. By the time we reached the final property hearing, part of the expedited process, things were already over in every way that mattered. Eleanor walked in looking smaller, drained. She didn't even look at me. Maya sat behind her again, but she wasn't glaring anymore. She looked restless, like she didn't want to be there. The judge went over everything in a steady voice. The financial records, the verified evidence, the lack of proof for any of her accusations, and my verified role as co-owner of the business. Therefore, the judge said, the court finds that the business constitutes marital property and awards Mr. Jefferson 50% of its total value, including related assets. Additionally, Mrs. Jefferson is ordered to cover Mr. Jefferson's legal fees due to her prior false declaration and failure to comply with discovery requests. Eleanor's shoulders slumped. Maya's face went pale. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even look their way. I just nodded at my lawyer and started gathering my papers. Behind me, I could hear Maya whispering something sharp, and then the sound of her chair scraping as she stood up and stormed out of the courtroom. The door slammed hard enough to make the judge sigh. Eleanor stayed seated, frozen, staring down at the documents in front of her. For a moment, I thought she might speak. She didn't. She just stared. Maybe at the numbers. Maybe at herself. A few weeks later, word got around that the house was listed for sale under the court's order. The judge ruled that selling it was the only fair way to divide the value evenly. Eleanor had no choice but to comply. The business she'd fought so hard to claim alone was split down the middle. Half its profits and assets transferred to me through the court's enforcement. Not long after, Maya moved out. Apparently, they'd had another major fight. This time about money. A friend of a friend told me Eleanor screamed that Maya had ruined her entire life. And Maya yelled back that Eleanor should have known better than to believe everything. That was the last I heard about them for a while. Meanwhile, my name was cleared everywhere that mattered. The court's ruling was public record. The local network that had quietly spread rumors now had written proof of my innocence. I started getting messages from old clients again. Short, respectful ones. "Glad things got sorted, Mike. Knew you weren't that kind of guy." I didn't reply to most of them. I didn't need their approval anymore. By the end of that month, the money from the settlement hit my account. That was the business split and the fee award. The house proceeds would come later, once the sale closed. Eleanor had her reputation ruined, her business fractured, her daughter gone, all because she didn't ask for my side. No revenge post, no speech, just silence. Months passed, and the noise faded with time. The messages stopped. The whispers disappeared. The lawyers closed their files. It was strange how quickly chaos could turn into quiet once the truth settled. Life became quiet enough to think again. And for once, the thoughts weren't heavy. They were still, steady, the kind that come from peace, not pain. Then, one evening, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't aggressive, not the kind that made you tense, just soft, hesitant. I almost didn't answer, but something in the rhythm made me stand. When I opened it, Eleanor was standing there. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Her hair was shorter, duller. The woman who used to wear sharp heels and confidence now stood in worn flats and tired eyes. Her shoulders drooped like the weight of everything she'd built was finally crushing her. "Hi," she said quietly. I didn't move. I just held the door open halfway. "You shouldn't be here," I said flatly. "I know," she replied. "I just needed to see you." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm not here for money," she said quickly. "Or property. I don't want anything from you." I waited. She looked down, twisting her fingers together. "I just came to ask for your forgiveness." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it felt to hear that word from her after everything. Forgiveness. She kept talking. I know you have no reason to. I know what I did was... Her voice cracked again. Unforgivable. But I can't live with the thought that you hate me. I just want peace, Mike. Please. Her eyes filled with tears. She took a step closer, but I didn't move back or forward. I just stood still, watching her, remembering that night she didn't even let me speak. The slap, the accusation, the way she looked at me like I was filth. When she finally stopped talking, I spoke quietly, my voice steady. Why would I give you another chance through forgiveness? I said, when you never gave me one to explain myself. She stared at me, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was scared, she whispered. I thought I was protecting her. Protecting her from what? I asked. The man who sheltered her? The man who fixed her car, her laptop, her life? She shook her head, crying harder now. I didn't know what to believe. You didn't care what was true, I interrupted. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I've lost everything, Mike. My daughter won't talk to me. The house is gone. The business is falling apart. I just want to make peace with you. I let out a slow breath. Peace starts with truth, not guilt. She looked up, eyes red, breathing uneven. Then tell me what to do. I shook my head. You already did everything. That's the problem. We stood there in silence. The hallway light flickered once, and for a moment it felt like time froze. Finally, I said, you should go. She opened her mouth to speak, but didn't. She just nodded, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and turned toward the elevator. When the doors closed behind her, I stood there for a few seconds longer before closing the door. Slowly, without anger, just finality. She lost her house, her business, her daughter's respect. I lost none of that. I lost illusions. And that I could live without. That night, I opened a small box I'd kept tucked away in the back of the closet. The last traces of that old life. The wedding ring. A few old pictures. The house keys. I drove out to the river, parked near the edge, and stood there for a while under the cold night air. I opened the box, looked at everything one last time, and without hesitation, threw it all into the water. The splash was quiet, barely there, but it sounded final. The ring sank first, then the pictures drifted apart, the keys disappearing beneath the ripples. I watched until the surface went still again. When I got back home, I locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat in silence. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. No ghosts, no noise, no weight, just peace. And I realized that real revenge isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about making sure they never have power over you again. And I had finally done that. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. At Thanksgiving dinner, my father told me, your job is to work while your brother enjoys life. If you have a problem, there's the door. I said, fine. I'll leave, and you can start paying your bills. Hey, Reddit. At Thanksgiving, my father demanded I continue giving them my paycheck while my brother streamed on Twitch all day. So I dropped my entire keyring into a bowl of mashed potatoes and walked out. Here's what went down. Quick background. I'm Evan, 27 male, and I've been running my parents' nursery business since I was basically a kid. By 18, I was handling the books, fixing their mistakes, and keeping the whole operation from tanking. Meanwhile, my younger brother Jordan plays video games for a living and gets treated like he cured cancer. I'm talking full worship mode. And me? I'm the guy who fixes the irrigation systems at 5 a.m. and gets zero credit. That dynamic's been my whole life, until Thanksgiving. Rain was hammering the greenhouse roof while I sat at Thanksgiving dinner with a plate of food. The table had the fancy china out. Mom had gone full Martha Stewart. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, the whole thing. And sitting in the middle of it all was Jordan, 25 years old and grinning like he'd done something worth celebrating. He'd shown up 40 minutes late wearing a hoodie that probably cost more than my weekly check. Didn't help cook. Didn't help set up. Just walked in and sat down like he was the guest of honor. To Jordan, Dad said, raising his cup. Our champion. 60,000 subscribers now. Building something real. You know Bill from the nursery supply company was asking about your streaming. His grandson watches you, apparently. Dad had practiced that toast. I could tell. He'd gone over it. Wanted to get the subscriber count right. Wanted to sound like a proud father. Jordan ate it up. Thanks, Pops. Yeah, the channel's blowing up right now. Just hit 62,000 subs. Got a tournament sponsor reaching out. Energy drink company. Could be huge. I'd been at Mountain Ridge Gardens since 5 that morning. Fixed a busted irrigation line in Greenhouse 2 that would have flooded $20,000 in inventory. Went through 3 months of supplier invoices and found billing errors that saved us almost $4,000. Then spent 4 hours at City Hall closing the municipal landscaping contract. Maintenance for 8 city parks, 3-year deal, $30,000 in profit per quarter. I set down my fork. Dad, I said, the municipal contract. Closed it this morning. That's $30,000 in profit per quarter. 3-year deal with the city. He didn't even look at me. Evan, you were born to tend the soil so Jordan can bloom. That's just how it is. Some people support. Some people shine. That's life. Mom nodded while cutting her turkey. Your brother has a gift, honey. You're more practical. Ground level. Everyone has their place. She said it like it was basic common sense. I sat there processing those words. Just who you are. Like I'd been assigned a role at birth and that was that. Jordan was scrolling through his phone, not even pretending to care about the dinner Mom spent all day making. Last week he'd posted a photo in our greenhouse with the caption, "Rooted in family, growing to greatness." The greenhouse I maintained. The plants I'd picked out and arranged. My work making him look good. I'd been working at Mountain Ridge Gardens since I was 11. By 18, I took over the books after Dad nearly tanked the business, ordering $8,000 worth of Italian pots that sat unsold for 2 years. Spent 9 years running the place while they took credit. And Jordan made videos playing games and talking about grinding and dedication. Last month, he'd done a whole stream about his journey, how family support made all the difference. The gaming PC I'd helped pay for. The soundproofed room I'd helped build. My support. Never mentioned. I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Reached down and unclipped the massive keyring from my belt loop. The one I'd carried every single day for nearly a decade. Keys to the delivery trucks, the walk-in cooler, the greenhouses, the office, the petty cash safe, the chemical storage, the equipment shed, the main building. I held it over the table for a second. Dad finally looked at me, just annoyed that I was interrupting his Jordan worship session. Then I dropped the whole ring straight into the bowl of mashed potatoes. The splash was perfect. A key stuck up like a flag. Potatoes splattered onto Dad's shirt. Jordan actually looked up from his phone, confused. Then the soil's on its own, I said. Silence. Then Dad started, "What the heck was that?" "You heard me. You can start paying your own bills." I walked out, grabbed my jacket, left the greenhouse door wide open on my way out. I got in my truck, rain pounding the windshield, wipers going full speed but barely keeping up. 30 minutes later, I pulled into my studio apartment on the south side. 350 square feet of converted warehouse space I'd been secretly renting for 16 months. My parents thought I lived in their guest cottage. Thought I was right there whenever they needed something fixed or dealt with or cleaned up. They had no clue I'd been building my exit for over a year. The apartment was small, but it was mine. Paid for with money I'd made from freelance landscape design jobs they didn't know about. The ones I did on weekends when they thought I was running errands for the nursery. My phone started buzzing before I got my jacket off. 23 missed calls by the time I tossed it on the counter and left it there. I walked straight to my laptop, logged into my bank. The autopay screen loaded. There it was. The standing transfer I'd set up 4 years ago after they'd maxed their cards and came to me about losing their downtown condo. $2,400 on the first of every month. Their rent. Nice place with a mountain view and a doorman. They told everyone it was a smart downsize after selling their house. Never mentioned their youngest son was covering it while they spent the nursery profits on Jordan's streaming equipment and tournament travel. I clicked cancel. Next, I pulled up the North Carolina Business Registry. I'd started the paperwork 8 months ago to remove myself as the registered agent for Mountain Ridge Gardens. Been too scared to finish it. Kept thinking maybe they'd finally see me as something other than the help. Not anymore. I filled in the final fields, signed the form, hit submit. I was no longer legally tied to their business. They couldn't put my name on loans anymore. Couldn't use my credit as backup. Couldn't make me responsible for their mounting debts. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was quiet except for the rain. My phone kept lighting up on the counter. Text after text. I didn't look, just listened to the rain. I slept better that night than I had in years. Woke up at 5 feeling more rested than I'd felt in months. Made coffee, checked my email for client work, saw 61 missed calls on my phone and a string of desperate texts. Ignored all of it. Opened my laptop and started working on a design proposal for a private client. The first real crack showed up around 8. Text from Dad. Irrigation system failure in Zone 3. Orchids dying. Get here and fix the valves, now. Not a question. A command. Like I was still on his payroll. Like walking out 2 days ago was just a phase he could ignore. I knew exactly what was happening. The automated misting system I designed and installed 6 years ago needed daily checks and maintenance. Complex setup with solenoids, pressure regulators, moisture sensors for different plant zones. Without adjustments, the hard Asheville water would clog the nozzles within 2 days. The tropical section would go first. The Cattleyas, the Vandas, the Phalaenopsis. I drank my coffee, opened a CAD program, started sketching elevation plans for my client's property. Let the phone buzz. 30 minutes later, a photo came through. Close-up of a Vanda orchid, its deep purple petals brown and shriveled at the edges. Caption: Look what you're destroying. Thousands in inventory loss. Stop being childish and do your job. My job. Still thought he could just demand I come running back. Then Jordan's messages started rolling in. Bro, seriously. Dad's losing it. Mom's been crying in the kitchen for an hour. I've got a sponsored stream in 3 hours that I need to prep for. Can't focus with all this drama. Whatever your problem is, deal with it later. Come fix the water thing so I can work. Their business was dying, their inventory was dying, and his concern was that the drama might mess with his gaming performance. The next text came 5 minutes later. Dude, seriously, this is my livelihood. You're killing my career right now. At least think about someone other than yourself for once. The old me would have caved right there. Would have driven over and spent 8 hours fixing valves and recalibrating sensors while they stood around complaining that I'd let things get this bad. While Jordan streamed from the guest cottage I'd helped soundproof, making money from followers who thought his parents were so supportive. The old me died on Thanksgiving. I took screenshots of every text, every demand, every guilt trip, saved them all. Then I put my phone on silent, laced up my running shoes, and went for a 10-mile run in the rain. Ran until my legs burned and my lungs hurt, and all I could think about was feet hitting pavement. When I got back 2 hours later, there were 47 new messages. The desperation was ramping up fast. Dad called me ungrateful, selfish, a disgrace to the family name. Mom said I was breaking her heart, that she'd raised me better than this. Jordan said I was sabotaging his career, and he'd never forgive me for this level of betrayal, that I was jealous of his success. Not one acknowledged what they'd said at dinner. It was all about what I could fix for them, what I was supposed to do to make their lives comfortable again. That night, I pulled out the old shoebox from my closet, the one I'd been avoiding for years. It was full of birthday cards and letters from my grandfather before he died when I was 23. Dad's father. He'd been the only one who ever really saw me instead of what I could do. There was a card in there from my 21st birthday. Evan, you've got a gift for making things grow. Don't let anyone convince you that gift exists to serve their garden instead of building your own. Some people are takers. They'll drain you dry and call it love. Real love wants to see you succeed on your own. I'd read it dozens of times, but never really got it until now. He'd seen exactly what my parents were doing. Seen them grooming me to be the engine, while Jordan got to be the show car. He'd tried to warn me. I taped that card to my refrigerator with a magnet. A reminder. A blessing from the only person who'd ever been fully on my side. My phone lit up again. This time it was my Aunt Janet, Dad's older sister. She'd been cut off from the family since 2017 when she called Dad a parasitic narcissist at a Christmas party. I didn't stay in touch with her after that. Didn't want to cause more family drama. She'd texted, "Heard you finally grew a spine. Good. Call me when you're ready to hear the whole story." I stared at that message for a long time. The whole story. What story? I called her. She answered on the first ring. "Took you long enough," she said. "When can you meet?" We met the next morning at a diner off the highway. Janet was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back booth with a cardboard file box on the seat next to her. She looked older than I remembered. Gray streaks in her hair she didn't bother covering. Tired eyes that had seen enough family garbage to fill a book. But when she saw me, she smiled. "You look different," she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. "Better." I left, I told her. "Cut them off." "Good. Should have done it years ago." She pushed the file box toward me. "Saved this from your grandfather's house. Your dad wanted to trash it all. Called it clutter. But I read through it first." "What is it?" "Evidence. That they've been planning this." I opened the box. It was full of documents. Tax returns from the early 2000s. Old receipts. Business ledgers. But underneath everything was a heavy accordion folder. My grandfather's handwriting on the tab. For Evan's future. Protected. Inside was a trust document. Legal, notarized, official. Set up in 2016. Amount, $175,000. Beneficiary: Evan Michael Doyle. Access granted at age 25. My hands started shaking as I read it. That money would have changed everything. Would have paid off my student loans. Would have bought land, equipment, a truck that didn't need constant repairs. Freedom. The ability to start my own landscaping business without being crushed by startup costs or having to scrape together capital while working 80-hour weeks. Then I saw the next page. The withdrawal record. March 2nd, 2020. Complete liquidation. Wire transfer to an account in Nevada. And at the bottom, on the signature line, was my name. But it wasn't my signature. The letters were too loopy. My handwriting was straightforward. Practical. This was someone trying to be fancy. It looked exactly like my mother's handwriting. The same way she signed greeting cards and grocery lists. I stared at the date. March 2020. That was when Jordan moved to Las Vegas. When he rented a penthouse near the Strip to be closer to the esports scene. Said he needed to be where the action was. Where the connections happened. When he bought his top-tier streaming setup. Dual monitors, professional lighting, green screen, the works. When he hired a brand manager and a video editor for his content. When he leased a BMW to drive around Vegas for his Instagram. Posted photos of it constantly with captions about grinding and success. They'd told me he won a gaming tournament. 5-figure prize. Said he was finally making it. Making real money. They'd even shown me the check he'd posted online. Proud parents sharing their son's success. Never mentioned where the seed money came from. Never mentioned the trust fund. Never mentioned that they'd forged my signature and stolen my future to bankroll 8 months of Jordan playing video games in a penthouse. They'd stolen my inheritance and funneled it into Jordan's Vegas fantasy. And when he came back 8 months later after burning through it all, after getting evicted and losing his sponsors, they just never mentioned it. Acted like the Vegas thing had been a learning experience. Character building. Janet was watching me process it. She'd known this day would come. Had been waiting for it. There's more, she said quietly. Look at the ledger, the green one, and the manila envelope underneath. Your grandfather kept good records. I pulled out a worn accounting ledger. My grandfather's business records from before he sold Mountain Ridge Gardens to my dad in 2015. The numbers told a clear story. The nursery had been profitable. Steady income averaging $60,000 to $70,000 annually after expenses. Smart buying, low overhead, reliable customer base. He'd built something solid. Then I looked at the ledger underneath it. My dad's records from 2016 onward. Red ink everywhere. Massive overspending on imported Italian pots that nobody in Asheville wanted. Leasing 3 delivery vehicles when we only needed 1. Paying for brand consultants to redesign the logo 4 separate times. Expensive memberships to garden clubs and business groups that generated 0 revenue. Premium booth space at trade shows we couldn't afford. And at the bottom of every quarterly summary, a note in my dad's handwriting. Evan covering shortfall. Covering. Like I was an insurance policy he could claim against whenever his decisions went sideways. Q2 2017. Evan covering $8,200. Q4 2018. Evan covering $12,500. On and on. Thousands of dollars per quarter. My money, my work, covering their lifestyle. I pulled out the manila envelope. Inside were bank statements from an account I'd never seen. My parents' personal savings from 2016 to 2018. It showed regular deposits, all labeled as nursery profits when the business ledger showed we were barely breaking even. They'd been siphoning money from the business while I covered the losses, taking money out the back while I kept the front from collapsing. Every deposit matched weeks where I'd covered major shortfalls. They'd been using you as their emergency fund since you were 19, Janet said. Your grandfather saw it happening. That's why he set up the trust with explicit instructions that only you could access it at 25. How long did he know? A few years before he died. Tried talking to your dad. Got accused of playing favorites. That's when he got his lawyer involved. I looked up at Janet. She was drinking her coffee, giving me time to absorb it. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Would you have believed me? 2 years ago? 3? You were still trying to earn their approval. If I'd told you then, you would have defended them. Made excuses. Convinced yourself I was the bitter sister causing drama. She was right. But now, she continued, you're ready. You know what they are. Now, you can do something about it. I pulled out my phone. Took photos of everything. Then I called the Asheville Police Department. I'd like to report a theft, I said. Grand larceny and forgery. I have all the documentation. And I know exactly who did it. Janet smiled. Satisfied, like watching a long overdue correction finally happen. Burn it all down, she said. At the police station, I sat in an interview room with the detective, a woman in her early 40s. I laid out the documents on the metal table: the trust, the forged signature, the bank records, the business ledgers, everything organized and labeled like I was presenting a case. She studied each document, made notes. When she got to the signature comparison, she pulled out a magnifying loupe from her desk drawer and examined it under the fluorescent light for a solid minute. "This is clear forgery," she said. "The hesitation marks. Different letter formation? See the E? That's not your hand?" I showed her photos of my mother's cards and notes. She compared them. The match was obvious. "Solid forensic evidence," she said. "Combined with the timeline and where the money went, we have enough. Class C felony. Grand larceny. Forgery. Your mother's looking at prison time." "Good," I said. "You understand what you're doing?" she asked. "Once we file charges, there's no walking this back. You need to be sure." "I understand they forged my signature and stole my inheritance," I said. "I'm sure." She nodded. "I'll need documentation. Anything showing pattern and motive. I've got years of it. Bank records, texts, emails. Get me everything. We'll bring them in for questioning." I left the station. My phone was still blowing up. 73 missed calls. Dad's messages had shifted from angry to pleading. Mom kept sending crying emojis. Jordan sent a voice memo I didn't listen to. Then I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. "Evan?" It was Jordan. Different phone. "Yeah. Bro, listen. I don't know what's going on with you and our parents, but you can't just ghost everyone. That's not how family works. We need to talk about this like adults. Man to man." I stayed quiet. "Look," he continued. "Dad said something messed up at dinner. I get it. But you can't just let Mom and Dad lose everything over some words. They're struggling. Like, really struggling. The rent check bounced. They're about to be evicted. You're seriously going to let that happen?" "Yeah," I said. "I am." "Come on, man. We're blood. Family sticks together during hard times. That's what separates us from everyone else. Blood doesn't mean you get to steal from me," I said. "You might want to ask Mom and Dad about March 2020, about where your Vegas money actually came from." Silence on his end. "What are you talking about?" "The trust fund. Grandpa's trust fund. The $175,000 he left for me. The one Mom forged my signature on to wire to your account for Vegas." "That was a tournament prize," he said. But his voice had changed. Shaky. "No, it was my inheritance. And they stole it." I hung up, blocked the new number, then blocked every number connected to them. The silence that followed was perfect. 5 days later, I was at work. I'd been with Asheville Landscape Design for 6 years, a job I'd kept completely separate from the family business. Nobody at work knew about Mountain Ridge Gardens or my complicated family situation. They just knew me as Evan, the landscape architect who specialized in native plant gardens. The firm was in a renovated brick building downtown. We were in the main conference room. Me, 2 senior partners, and 3 junior designers gathered around a drafting table reviewing plans for a residential terraced garden project in Biltmore Forest. High-end client, complex grading and drainage requirements. I was explaining why we needed specific native plant species for erosion control when the receptionist knocked on the open door. "Evan," she said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there are people in the lobby saying they're your parents. I explained you were in a meeting, but they're refusing to leave. They're being quite loud." The room went silent. 5 sets of eyes turned to me. My boss, Amanda, raised her eyebrows, clearly uncomfortable that personal drama was entering her workplace. "I'll handle it," I said. "My apologies for the interruption." 5 minutes. I took the stairs down to the lobby, and there they were, Dad and Mom, standing in the middle of the modern lobby like 2 homeless people who'd wandered in. They looked wrecked. Eviction had gone through 3 days ago. Dad's shirt was wrinkled, with visible stains that looked like coffee or maybe gravy. He hadn't shaved in over a week. Mom was wearing a coat too heavy for the climate-controlled building, clutching her purse with white knuckles. They looked desperate, broken, and I felt absolutely nothing. "Evan," Dad said, voice loud, echoing off the glass and concrete. "This stops now. You're going to end this tantrum. We have nowhere to go. You're going to help us." The receptionist had her hand on the phone, ready to call security. I held up a hand. "Not yet." "You're causing a scene," I said. "Leave. We're not leaving until you fix this," Mom said. Tears already starting, voice cracking. "We're your parents. How can you do this to us? We're sleeping in the car. You have money. You're going to help us. You have to help us. We raised you. We gave you everything." Dad stepped forward. "You have money. Dad said, stepping closer. You're going to write us a check. Co-sign a new lease. Today. I'm your father. Respect, I said. Is that what you call grand larceny? He froze. I reached into my bag, pulled out the photocopies, the forged signature, held it up. March 2nd, 2020, I said. 175,000. Wire transfer to Nevada. For Jordan's Vegas penthouse. His streaming equipment. His BMW. All funded by Grandpa's trust fund you stole. Mom reached out with a trembling hand. Son, wait. Explain what? How you forged my signature? How you stole my inheritance? That money was for the family, Dad said. But his voice was weak. He looked old, defeated. No, that money was for me. Grandpa made that crystal clear in the trust document. But you decided Jordan's gaming career was more important than my future. So you committed fraud. I stepped forward. For the first time in my life, they flinched. Stepped back. I filed a police report, I said. The fraud unit has the evidence. You're looking at charges. You wouldn't, Dad whispered. Already did. Evan, we're your parents. No, I said. You're criminals. There's a difference. I turned to the receptionist. Call security. Behind me, the glass doors slid open. Footsteps. Mom crying. Didn't turn around. One of the partners came down. You okay? Amanda asked. Yeah, I said. I'm good. Let's finish that meeting. The investigation moved faster than expected. The detective called me 3 weeks later on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at Janet's house helping her reorganize her garage in exchange for her storing some of my tools and equipment over the winter. Got your case resolved, she said. The handwriting analysis came back definitive. Your mother forged that signature. Bank records confirm everything. Wire transfer went directly to accounts linked to your brother's Vegas expenses. Rental agreements in his name. Equipment purchases. Vehicle lease. All documented and traceable. What happens now? Their attorney contacted us. They want a plea deal. They know going to trial would be expensive and they'd lose. The evidence is bulletproof. They're offering to plead guilty to felony fraud and forgery in exchange for reduced sentencing. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see them in court, wanted to watch them explain themselves to a judge, wanted their friends from the garden club to see them in orange jumpsuits. But dragging it out meant staying connected to them longer, meant more months of this taking up space in my head. What are the terms? No jail time, 2 years probation, 300 hours community service each, full restitution from liquidation of business assets, and a permanent restraining order. No contact with you ever again. Violation means immediate arrest. Agreed, I said, but I want everything liquidated. The nursery, the property, every asset they have. It all goes toward paying their debts and my restitution. The deal went through 10 days later. Mountain Ridge Gardens was sold to a regional nursery chain that wanted the location and existing customer base. Paid below market value because of the condition of the inventory and equipment. The property sold separately to a developer planning townhouses. Wanted the land more than the structures. The inventory got liquidated at auction for pennies on the dollar. Everything my parents had built, or rather, everything I'd built while they took credit, got turned into money to pay for their crimes. The final restitution check hit my account 6 weeks after that. $95,000. Not the full amount after legal fees and creditor claims, but more than enough. Through Janet, I heard the updates. Dad got a night stocking job at a hardware store. 10 to 6 shift. 40 hours a week. No benefits. Mom cleans hotel rooms. Morning shift. Kills her back. They rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a sketchy part of town. Take the bus because they can't afford car insurance. Haven't been to a restaurant in months. Pack lunches in paper bags. Nobody calls anymore. Jordan left Vegas after his second eviction. Bounced around. Tried restarting his streaming in Atlanta. Didn't work. The audience had moved on. New streamers. Better equipment. His subscriber count bled out. I used the restitution money and my savings to buy 8 acres of raw land in the mountains outside Asheville. It was overgrown, covered in kudzu and volunteer pine. The access road was barely passable. No utilities, no structures. Just raw land that nobody wanted. It was perfect. First thing I built was a workshop. 16 by 20 feet. Concrete slab I poured myself over 2 weekends. Wood frame with metal roof. Somewhere dry to plan projects and store equipment. Janet helped me with the foundation pour. Mixed concrete by hand. Hauled wheelbarrows. She was good company. Then I started clearing. Every weekend I'd drive out there with a chainsaw, work gloves, and a plan. Cut back the kudzu inch by inch. Remove the invasive species. Clear sightlines. Create zones. It was brutal work. My hands blistered through gloves. My back ached. but every square foot I cleared belonged to me. I hired a guy with an excavator to clear the main 5 acres. Took him 3 weeks working half days. I saved every usable piece of wood, milled some of it into rough lumber using a chainsaw mill I bought used, stacked the rest for future projects or firewood. 8 months in, I started my own landscape design business. Kept it small. Residential clients only. Native plant gardens, sustainable drainage systems, xeriscaping, rain gardens. The kind of work I actually enjoyed. Word spread through Asheville faster than I expected. Clients referred friends. Neighbors saw the work and called. And I'd show up, listen to what they wanted, design something practical and beautiful, then build it. Charged fair prices. Showed up on schedule. Did quality work without upselling unnecessary features. Within 6 months, I had more work than I could handle alone. 14 months after Thanksgiving, I had enough steady work to hire Janet part-time for project management and client scheduling. She was perfect for it. Organized, trustworthy. Could smell a difficult client from a mile away and knew how to handle them. We made a good team. The land became my focus in the best way. I planted an orchard, 25 trees, apples, pears, cherries, researched rootstocks, dug holes by hand, mixed compost into the native soil, staked each tree properly, built raised beds for vegetables using reclaimed wood from a demolished barn I'd bought for cheap. Cedar. Still smelled good. Installed a rainwater collection system with 4 750-gallon tanks positioned to gravity feed the garden beds. Every weekend was progress. Seeing the first blooms. Real proof that I was building something lasting. Janet came out to visit on a Saturday afternoon in late spring. We'd just finished installing a drip irrigation system for the orchard. She walked around the property, taking it all in. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said. "This is what he wanted for you. Something that belonged to you alone." I showed her the oak tree I'd planted near the center of the property. Same spot where I'd stood when I first bought the land. It was barely 5 feet tall now, but the roots were deep. The growth was healthy. "That's the thing about real growth," I told her. "It takes time. Can't fake it, can't force it. Just steady care and patience." She smiled. "You sound like him." She left that afternoon, hugged me at her truck, told me she was proud of me, that I'd done the right thing. About 18 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I was out in the workshop on one evening, planning a design for a client's hillside garden, when I heard a car pull up the muddy access road. Nobody came out here without warning. Nobody even knew about this place except Janet and a few clients who'd been referred through word of mouth. I walked outside. A beat-up Honda Civic sat in my makeshift parking area. The kind of car you buy for $1,500 cash and pray it lasts 6 months. And standing next to it, looking worse than I'd ever seen him, was Jordan. He looked wrecked. Thinner by maybe 30 or 40 pounds, older than his 26 years. His clothes hung loose on him like hand-me-downs from someone bigger. He had the look of someone who'd run out of options and was down to their last play. We stood there for maybe 10 seconds. "Hey," he said finally, voice quiet, defeated. I didn't respond, just waited, stood there with my arms crossed. "Look, I know you probably don't want to see me right now. I know I messed up. We all messed up. But I'm in a bad spot and I need help. I'm barely making rent in Atlanta. Lost my job at the call center last week. I've got maybe 2 weeks before I'm evicted and I don't have anywhere else to go. No friends I can crash with. No one who'll even return my calls. Mom and Dad are useless. They're barely surviving themselves." I leaned against my workshop door. Still didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. Let him fill it. Watched him squirm and shift his weight. "I know what they did," he continued. "All of it. I didn't know at the time. They told me it was a tournament prize, a cash payout from a sponsor who believed in me. I didn't find out until after you'd already filed charges, and Janet told me everything, when she explained what they'd done. I was shocked, man, I swear. That almost made me laugh. Shocked. Like he'd actually believed some random sponsor had dropped $175,000 on an unproven streamer with mediocre numbers. He'd taken it because it was convenient, because questioning it might have meant the party ended. "I'm asking you, as your brother, can you help me out? Few months, just until I get back on my feet. I can stay in your workshop, sleep on the floor. I don't need much. I'll work for you. Help with the landscaping business. Whatever you need. I just need one chance to rebuild. That's all I'm asking for." I watched him for a long moment, studied his face, looking for any sign he'd learned something, any hint that he understood what he'd been part of. All I saw was desperation wearing different clothes. "No," I said. "Come on, man. I'm your brother. Blood. That has to mean something. You can't just turn your back on blood. You were never my brother. I said. You were a project they funded with my inheritance. Now the project failed and you want me to fund the restart. The answer is no. I drove 4 hours to find you, used gas money I don't have. Should have saved it, spent it on something useful, like a reality check. Evan, please, I'm literally begging you here. What I want, I said, is for you to experience what it's like when nobody comes to save you, when there's no safety net, no backup plan, no free ride. You're 26 years old. You've never held a real job longer than 4 months. Never paid your own rent without someone covering it. Never faced actual consequences for your choices. Maybe this is what you need. So this is revenge? No, I said. This is just me living my life without subsidizing yours. Big difference. You need to leave. Where am I supposed to go? Not my problem. Never was. You just thought it was. You're just going to let your own brother end up on the street? After growing up together? All those years mean nothing? Nobody came to save me either, I said. Nobody stepped in when they were bleeding me dry. Nobody questioned it when I was working 80-hour weeks so you could play games. You want to talk about family? Family is a two-way street. You never drove on it. Welcome to adulthood. He stood there for another few seconds, maybe expecting me to crack, to change my mind, to be the person I'd always been who solved problems and covered shortfalls and made everything work for everyone else. His shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him. He looked around, seeing what I'd built, what I'd made from the ashes of everything they'd stolen. This is messed up, he said, voice finally breaking, getting angry now. You're not the same person. Yeah, I said. Took me long enough to figure it out. Thanks for that. I turned and walked back into my workshop. Didn't watch him leave, heard the car door slam. Engine struggled to start, coughed, turned over on the third try. Tires spun in the mud, caught, fishtailed slightly, then found traction. The sound of his dying Honda disappearing down the access road. I sat down at my desk, looked at the design I'd been working on. Work for a client who'd paid a deposit on time and said thank you when I presented the concept. Something I'd never gotten at home. My phone was silent. My land was mine. My future was mine. Built on work I chose to do for people who respected it. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, orange and purple sky burning. The oak tree I'd planted was silhouetted against it, still growing, taking its time. Strong roots going deeper every season. My workshop, my trees, my orchard, my greenhouse, my life. I turned back to my work and kept building. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. This story is titled, My Brother Who Stole My Wife. 4 years ago, finally came home for a visit. He mocked me with my ex until my dad dropped the truth that wrecked them. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I've been trying to write this post for a while now, but it's not easy putting everything into words. I guess I should start from the beginning, back when things were normal and I actually thought I had a good life. So a year ago, I, 32 male, was living what I thought was pretty much the perfect life with my wife Sarah, 30 female. We'd been married for 5 years at that point, had our own house. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, you know. We even had this amazing Maine Coon cat named Lumi, who Sarah gave me for our first anniversary. Man, that cat is something else. Pure white fur, super intelligent, and definitely thinks she runs the household. Let's be real, she does. I work in software development, not making crazy Silicon Valley money or anything, but enough that we were comfortable. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher at this really nice school about 20 minutes from our place. She was really good at her job too. Like, parents would specifically request to have their kids in her class. Every day she'd come home with these hilarious stories about what the kids did or said. We'd sit at dinner and just laugh about all the weird things that happened in her classroom. We had this whole routine that just worked, you know? Mornings were our thing. We'd get up early and have coffee together before work. Sarah would do this thing where she'd steal my coffee when she thought I wasn't looking, even though she had her own right in front of her. Said mine always tasted better for some reason. Weekends were for sleeping in, well, trying to. Lumi had other ideas about breakfast time, making pancakes and just doing normal couple stuff. My older brother Jake, 35 male, was around a lot too. He worked at this big investment firm downtown, always showing up in these expensive suits and that stupid Mercedes he wouldn't shut up about. Mom and Dad basically thought he was God's gift to the family business. Dad owns this pretty successful construction company that Jake helped manage the finances for. Everyone was always talking about how successful Jake was, how smart he was with money, how he was really making something of himself. I started noticing the signs, but I didn't piece them together at the time. Jake would randomly stop by our house when he knew I was working late, always finding an excuse to be around. At family dinners, he somehow always ended up sitting next to Sarah. Then there were the little comments, subtle digs about my house, my car, or my job. Never outright insults, just these offhand remarks about how he could never settle for my lifestyle. But you don't expect that kind of thing from your own brother, right? And every time he said something, Sarah would just roll her eyes and cuddle closer to me, so I figured everything was fine. Sarah and I had all these plans we were working on. We'd been saving up for a bigger house, talking about having kids soon. She'd already picked out names, wanted to name a boy after her grandfather, stuff like that. We even started looking at houses with bigger yards because Sarah was convinced Lumi needed more space to express herself. Pretty sure Lumi just wanted more birds to watch through the windows. Man, Lumi was so excited every time we went house hunting. Sarah would hold up these cat beds or toys at different stores and ask, "What do you think of this for your new room, Lumi?" Like the cat was going to give design advice or something. But that was Sarah, always including Lumi in everything like she was our kid. I really thought we had it all figured out. Good jobs, nice house, plans for the future, amazing cat. What more could you want, right? Sarah seemed happy too. We still did date nights every month, still cuddled on the couch watching movies with Lumi sprawled across both our laps. She still kissed me goodbye every morning and sent me random texts during the day just to say she loved me. I know this probably sounds super boring to most people. No crazy parties or exotic vacations or anything. Just normal life stuff. But I liked it. I liked coming home to Sarah and Lumi, liked our little routines, liked planning our future together. Liked that Sarah seemed to want the same things I did. Yeah, Jake would make comments sometimes about how I needed to think bigger or take more risks, like him. But I had everything I wanted. But funny, how fast things can change, how people you trust completely can just, yeah. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That was my life a year ago. Normal, happy, stable, the calm before everything went to hell, I guess. So remember how I mentioned those monthly date nights with Sarah? We had this favorite Italian place called Romano's. Nothing super fancy, but the food was amazing, and they knew us there. Like the owner Mario would always save our table and bring out this special garlic bread Sarah loved. That night started normal enough. I got to Romano's early because I wanted to surprise Sarah with flowers. She'd had a rough week at work dealing with some angry parent. I remember being kind of excited because I'd also found this little cat-shaped keychain that looked exactly like Lumi, and I knew Sarah would love it. I was walking to our usual table when I saw them. Jake and Sarah sitting in this corner booth. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. Like, maybe they ran into each other? Maybe they were planning something for my birthday? But nah, the way they were sitting, how close they were. Jake's hand was on hers, and Sarah was looking at him with this expression I used to think was just for me. I just stood there, locked in place, watching my brother and my wife look at each other the way she used to look at me. They didn't even notice me at first, just sitting there, all cozy, laughing about something. Then Sarah looked up and saw me standing there with these stupid flowers in my hand. You guys want to know what she did? She smiled. Not even an embarrassed smile or a guilty smile. Just this casual smile, like she'd been waiting for me to find out. And Jake? This piece of work actually said, and I swear I'm not making this up, "Oh, hey, bro. We were wondering when you'd figure it out." Like this was some kind of game or something. I just stood there for a minute, probably looking like an idiot. Then Jake goes, "Come on, you had to know Sarah was too good for your lifestyle." And that's when it really sunk in. This wasn't just about Sarah. This wasn't even just about betrayal. This was about disrespect. It wasn't enough for Jake to have more money, a flashier car, or Dad's approval. He had to take my wife. And not just take her, he wanted me to see it. To know that he could step into my life, take what was mine, and win. He wasn't just trying to steal Sarah. He was trying to erase me. My fist clenched so tight I felt my nails dig into my palms. My own brother, the guy who was supposed to have my back, had looked at my life and decided he was entitled to it. And Sarah? She didn't just let it happen. She went along with it. Like I was nothing. Like I never mattered. Every guy knows there's a line you don't cross. You don't mess with your brother's girl. You don't tear down your own blood just to prove a point. But Jake never believed in lines. Not when it came to me. I'm not proud of what I did next, but in that moment, I completely lost it. The betrayal, the smugness, the way they sat there so casually like they hadn't just destroyed my life, it all hit me at once. I don't even remember what I yelled, just that my voice was shaking with rage. My hands were clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms, but it wasn't enough. I needed to do something, so I swiped my arm across the table, knocking over their fancy bottle of wine, some overpriced crap Jake probably bought with company money. Glass shattered, red wine spilled across the table like blood, and suddenly the whole restaurant was staring. Jake shot up from his seat, acting all indignant, like I was the problem here. He stepped toward me, running his mouth about how I was overreacting, how Sarah had chosen him, like that made it okay. Something in me just snapped. I lunged at him, shoving him so hard he stumbled into a chair. For a second, he actually looked scared, but before I could do anything else, the staff was between us, pulling me back, telling me to calm down, like I was the one who had started this. And Sarah? She didn't flinch, didn't defend me, didn't even look guilty. She just sat there, arms crossed, lips pressed in that irritated way she did when I forgot to take the trash out. Like I was ruining her evening, like this wasn't my entire life crashing down around me. That's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. Neither of them were. I left and drove home. Couldn't even think straight. Lumi knew something was wrong the second I walked in. She's scary smart like that. Just followed me around the house meowing while I paced and tried to figure out what to do. Sarah didn't come home that night, or the next night, or ever again actually. Went straight to Jake's place. Guess they'd been planning this for a while. The next day I got these texts that I still have saved, because sometimes I need to remind myself I'm not crazy. Jake, look man, these things happen. Sarah and I have a real connection. You're my brother and all, but you gotta admit she deserves better than your basic 9-to-5 life. No hard feelings? Sarah, I was going to tell you eventually. Jake and I just clicked. He has ambition, you know. Goals. All you care about is your little programming job and that cat. I need more than that. Then they both started calling and texting, trying to explain how they didn't mean for this to happen, and how sometimes love just finds you, and all this other BS. Jake even had the nerve to say, bros before hoes doesn't apply when it's true love, right? I didn't respond to any of it. Just sat on my couch with Lumi in my lap, trying to process how my life had just completely fallen apart. The worst part wasn't that I lost Sarah. It wasn't even that Jake had her. It was that I felt small, like I'd let this happen, like I wasn't enough, not for Sarah, not for my own family. And that feeling? That burned more than anything. The next few weeks were a mess. Sarah came by when I was at work and took a bunch of her stuff. She tried to take Lumi too, but my neighbor, shout out to Mrs. Chen, real MVP, saw what was happening and called me. I rushed home and Sarah was literally trying to get Lumi into a carrier while my cat was having none of it. I lost it again. Told Sarah she could take whatever else she wanted, but Lumi was my cat. Her anniversary gift to me, registered in my name, all vet records in my name. She actually tried to argue that she picked Lumi out, so technically the cat was hers. Yeah, no, that was my line in the sand. Meanwhile, Jake kept showing up at my work, trying to explain things. Saying stuff like, you'll thank me later, and Sarah was always meant for someone like me. Someone like him. What does that even mean? A lying, cheating dirtbag who steals his brother's wife? The worst part? Some of my family actually took their side. Mom was upset but kept saying stuff like, well, you know how Jake is. Like that made it okay. Dad was more concerned about how this would affect the business than how I was doing. Only my sister Katie straight up told Jake he was dead to her. But even with Katie in my corner, I wasn't prepared for what came next. The divorce was a complete nightmare. Sarah hired this aggressive lawyer who tried to take everything, wanted half my savings, my car, which I bought before we even met, and even tried to argue she deserved money for contributing to my career growth because she supported me emotionally while I got promotions. Like, what? The worst part was how they tried to get Lumi. Sarah's lawyer actually argued in court that since Sarah picked out Lumi, she had emotional ownership, or some garbage like that. The judge shut that down real quick when I showed all the vet records, registration papers, and proof that Lumi was a gift to me. Should have seen Sarah's face when she realized she couldn't take my cat. First time her perfect little act cracked. Jake was there at every court meeting, sitting right behind Sarah like some kind of bodyguard in his expensive suits. He kept trying to talk to me in the hallways, saying stuff like, come on man, let's be reasonable here, and you're still my brother, we can work this out. Like he actually thought I'd want anything to do with him after what he did. While all this was happening, they started posting all over Instagram and Facebook about their amazing love story and how sometimes the heart wants what it wants. Jake even posted this long thing about how true love means taking risks and tagged Sarah in it. Made me want to throw my phone across the room. Lumi actually knocked it out of my hands once when I was getting too worked up reading their stuff, like she knew it wasn't good for me. The divorce finally got settled after 2 months of back and forth. I kept the house. I bought it before marriage with my own savings, my car, and obviously Lumi. Sarah got her car and whatever she'd already taken from the house. She tried to argue for more, but her lawyer finally told her she didn't have a case. Here's where it starts getting good, though. Remember how Jake worked at Dad's construction company, handling all the finances? Well, right after the divorce was final, they posted all these vacation photos from the Maldives. The funny thing? Dad had been noticing some weird numbers in the company accounts. Nothing major at first, just little things that didn't add up. But these vacation posts made him look closer. Why? Because the trip they were bragging about cost more than Jake's yearly salary. Meanwhile, I was actually doing okay. I stopped visiting the family house. I focused on work, got a promotion because turns out when you're not dealing with a cheating wife and backstabbing brother, you can actually get stuff done. Lumi and I got into this routine. Morning cuddles, work from home some days. She loves lying on my keyboard during Zoom meetings. Evening walks around the neighborhood where she follows me like a dog. My sister Katie started coming over more too. She's the only one in the family who completely cut Jake off. She and Lumi became best buddies. Pretty sure my cat likes her better than me sometimes. Katie would bring over takeout and we'd just hang out, her playing with Lumi while telling me all the family gossip I was missing. That's when we started hearing stuff about Jake at work. Nothing concrete at first, just whispers about numbers not matching up. Missing receipts, weird transfers. Dad wasn't saying anything, but Katie noticed he was staying late at the office a lot, having meetings with accountants. Sarah wasn't looking so happy in their social media posts anymore either. The designer clothes posts slowed down, the fancy dinner pics stopped. Jake was still posting about living large and success mindset, but something seemed off. Then one day, while I was working from home, I got this call from Dad. His voice was different, serious in a way I'd never heard before. "Family meeting tomorrow," he said. "Your brother will be there." I tried to say no, but Dad cut me off. "This isn't a request, and trust me, you want to be there for this." I really didn't want to go. Hadn't been to my parents' house since Jake and Sarah announced their engagement 3 months after my divorce was final. Yeah, they moved that fast. But Dad wasn't taking no for an answer. That morning was weird. Lumi somehow knew something was up. She wouldn't leave me alone while I was getting ready, kept following me around meowing. Walking into that house was, man, I don't know how to describe it. You know that feeling when you're about to get into a fight and your whole body is just tensed up? Like that, but worse. Jake's stupid Mercedes was in the driveway, the one he always bragged about, parked crooked like he'd been in a hurry. They were already there when I walked in. Jake and Sarah sitting on the couch like they owned the place. Jake in another expensive suit, Sarah decked out in designer everything. The second I walked in, Jake started with his usual crap. "Hey, ugly, still driving that Toyota?" He smirked. His fiancée added, "How's the cat? Still your only companion?" Real mature, right? I clenched my jaw, inhaling deeply through my nose. I had spent years preparing for this moment, convincing myself that if I ever saw them again, I wouldn't let them get to me, that I had grown beyond their petty jabs. But I was about to get up and leave because it didn't feel right, when Dad walked in. Now, you gotta understand my dad. He's not a loud guy, doesn't yell or anything. But when he wants attention, you shut up. He's got this way of just commanding a room. He sat down at his desk, the same desk where he used to help us with homework when we were kids, and pulled out this thick folder. Just set it there between us all. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Dad looked straight at Jake and said, "Want to tell me about the Anderson contract?" Jake's face did this weird thing, like he tried to keep smirking but couldn't quite manage it. "What about it?" Dad pulled out some papers. Interesting numbers here. Contract was for $2.4 million, but our books only show $1.8 million received. Want to explain that? Sarah shifted in her seat. Jake waved his hand like it was nothing. Probably just a clerical error. "I'll have accounting look into it." "Already did," Dad said. Started laying out more papers. Just like I looked into the Wilson project, and about 20 other contracts over the past year. The room got really quiet. Jake's face was doing that twitchy thing it does when he's nervous. Sarah was clutching her designer purse so hard. "You really thought I wouldn't notice?" Dad asked. He wasn't yelling. Almost wish he had been. This calm voice was way worse. "You thought you could steal from your own family?" Jake tried to laugh it off. "Dad, come on. This is ridiculous. I've made this company more money than by stealing from it. Dad cut him off. By creating fake accounts? By skimming money from every major contract? He pulled out his laptop, turned it around. By paying for your lifestyle with company funds? The screen showed all these transactions. The Maldives trip, Sarah's shopping sprees, Jake's Mercedes payments, all paid for with company money through some complicated system of fake accounts and doctored invoices. Sarah started to say something, but Dad held up his hand. Oh, I know about your involvement too. The separate account in your name? The one getting regular transfers from our business accounts? Yeah, found that too. I just sat there watching it all unfold. Part of me wanted to laugh. All those times Jake bragged about his financial genius and business skills, turned out he was just stealing from Dad the whole time. Jake tried one more time. Dad, I can explain everything. We can work this out. The company's doing better than ever. I leaned back in my chair, watching him sweat through his overpriced suit. This was the guy who stole my wife? The guy who spent years looking down on me? I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. You thought you were the man, huh? Funny how that worked out. Jake's face twitched like he wanted to say something, but he had nothing. Because for the first time in his life, there was no way to talk his way out of it. Because of the contracts you didn't steal from? Dad asked. Then he picked up another paper. But we're not done. Want to tell me about Mom's medical fund? Now, quick background. Our mom passed away a few months before Jake and Sarah started their thing. She'd been sick for a while, needed lots of expensive treatments. Dad had set up this special fund for her care, was putting like $5,000 a month into it. Jake was supposed to handle all the payments since he was so good with money. Dad pulled out these bank statements, showed how all that money that was supposed to be for Mom's care, never made it to the hospital. Instead, it went straight into Jake's personal accounts. While Mom was struggling in the hospital, Jake was using her medical money to buy himself fancy suits and take Sarah on expensive dates. I felt sick, like physically sick. The affair was bad enough. But this? Using Mom's medical money? That's like a whole different level of messed up. Jake started stammering, trying to make excuses. There was a mix-up with the accounts. I was going to pay it back. The treatments weren't working anyway. Sarah just sat there, her face getting whiter and whiter. Guess she didn't know about this part. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Hard to tell with her. Dad wasn't done, though. He pulled up security camera footage on his laptop from some fancy hotel downtown. Timestamp showed it was from the night Mom. You know, there's Jake and Sarah all dressed up, laughing, dancing, while Mom was in the hospital, while I was sitting with her, while Dad was trying to reach Jake to tell him to come say goodbye. The footage was like a minute long, but felt like forever. When it ended, nobody said anything for what felt like hours. I felt sick into my stomach. I couldn't believe how far my brother would go in his betrayal. Then, Jake tried one last time. Dad, come on. I'm your son. Your successful son. The one who stole from his dying mother? Dad asked. His voice was so quiet it was scary. The one who embezzled from the family business? That successful son? Then Dad picked up this other envelope. The one he'd had on his desk the whole time. This is my will, he said. Want to know what's in it? Jake tried to smile, but it looked wrong. Like his face wasn't working right. Dad, let's not be dramatic. We can work this out. I'll pay everything back. Everything goes to your brother, Dad said. Just like that. The company, the house, all of it. Sarah jumped up then. You can't do that. We'll fight it. We'll get lawyers. Dad actually laughed. Not a happy laugh. More like a go ahead and try laugh. You mean the lawyers I already talked to? The ones who have copies of all the evidence? The FBI agents who are very interested in all this fraud? Jake's face went from red to white so fast it was almost funny. Sarah started doing this weird breathing thing, like she couldn't get enough air. You're bluffing, Jake said, but his voice was shaking. You wouldn't do this to your own son? Dad stood up. He's not a tall guy, but somehow he seemed huge right then. You did this to yourself. Both of you did. Now get out of my house. Sarah grabbed her purse and ran, like literally ran out the door. Jake just sat there for a minute, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Then he looked at me, actually tried to say something, but Dad cut him off. If you ever come near this family again, Dad said, I'll make sure you spend the next 20 years in prison. Now get out. Jake left. I stayed sitting there, trying to process everything. Dad just started putting all the papers back in their folders, calm as could be, like he hadn't just destroyed Jake's whole fake life in less than an hour. When I got home that night, Lumi was waiting by the door like she always does. Jumped right into my lap when I sat down, purring like crazy. I felt somehow my rights are coming back. but the fallout was harsh. The first thing that changed was Jake's job, obviously. Dad didn't just fire him. He had the company lawyers report everything to the authorities. Turns out stealing company money and messing with medical funds is pretty illegal. Who knew, right? Jake tried to play it off at first, kept posting on LinkedIn about exciting new opportunities and time for a change. But everyone at the company knew what really happened. Word gets around fast in the construction business, and Dad didn't try to hide why Jake was gone. The Mercedes disappeared first. Guess when you're buying cars with stolen money? The bank doesn't let you keep them. Sarah posted this long rant on Facebook about how they were choosing to simplify their lifestyle, and how material things don't matter when you have true love. Yeah, sure. Their fancy house was next. They'd bought it right after getting together, way bigger than they could actually afford, but Jake had been stealing enough to cover it. Now, bank took it back. They had to move into some small apartment across town. The real fun started when the FBI got involved. Remember all that evidence Dad had? Yeah, turned out the feds were very interested in how Jake had been moving money around. They showed up at his new apartment with a search warrant and everything. My sister Katie, still the best sister ever, works at a coffee shop near their apartment and saw the whole thing. Said Jake was trying to argue with the FBI agents while Sarah just stood there crying. But she got it all on video. Not posting it here for legal reasons, but man, watching Jake try to explain why he had all these fake company documents in his apartment was pretty satisfying. Their friends started disappearing too. All those people who'd sided with them during the affair, who'd posted supportive comments about their true love, suddenly they were nowhere to be found. Funny how people disappear when you can't buy them expensive dinners anymore. About a month after everything went down, Sarah suddenly reached out, sending this long, rambling message about how she never knew about the stealing and was just as much a victim as anyone. By then, word had gotten around that I was named in Dad's will, inheriting a significant share of the business. And suddenly, the same woman who had torn my life apart wanted to talk. She didn't say it outright, but the subtext was obvious. I messed up, but maybe we can work things out? I didn't even bother responding, but I did send her a picture of Lumi sleeping on my desk at the company office. Yeah, Dad made me head of finance after Jake left. My cat's living a better life than both of them now, and honestly, that feels like perfect justice. But fate? Fate had its own sense of humor. A few days later, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown, except I wasn't alone. I was with someone new, and she was everything Sarah wasn't. Sarah froze when she saw us. Her eyes flicked between me and the woman laughing at something I said, and for the first time since she left, she looked unsure. I made eye contact with her, held it for just a second, then turned back to my date like she didn't exist. That's when I knew. She finally got it. She wasn't special. She was just a mistake I grew past. Then Jake got arrested 2 weeks ago, looking at serious time, like decades. His lawyer keeps trying to make deals, but the evidence is pretty solid. Turns out Jake wasn't as smart with computers as he thought. The FBI found everything. Sarah filed for divorce the day after Jake's arrest, posted this whole thing on Facebook about being betrayed and how she was healing from trauma. Conveniently forgot to mention all the designer stuff she bought with stolen money. She's moved back in with her parents. Karma's funny like that. About 2 weeks after Jake went to jail, I got this call from a number I didn't recognize. Almost didn't answer it, but something told me I should. It was from the county jail. Jake's voice was different. Gone was that smug, better-than-you tone. He sounded small, broken even. First thing he said was, "I really messed up, didn't I?" I just sat there, petting Lumi who was in my lap as usual, trying to figure out what to say. Finally went with, "Yeah, you did." That's when he started crying. Actually crying. Said he was sorry, that he never meant for things to go this far, that he just got caught up in trying to prove he was successful. Started talking about Mom, how he thinks about her every night in his cell. I let him talk. Pretty sure he'd been practicing this speech for days. When he finally finished, you know what I said? The same thing he said to me that night at Romano's. "Well, this is awkward." Then I hung up. His lawyer called the next day. Tried to convince me to speak up for Jake at his sentencing. Said something about family bonds and second chances. I just laughed and hung up again. Dad's lawyer says Jake's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The fraud stuff was bad enough, but stealing from Mom's medical fund? That's what really got the prosecutors angry. Turns out judges don't like it when you steal money meant for your dying mother's care. Sarah tried to play innocent at first, changed her last name back, deleted all their photos together, told everyone who'd listen that she had no idea about the stealing. But the FBI found emails where she was helping Jake move money around. Her trial's next month, and from what the lawyers say, she's not looking at a fun time either. Meanwhile, my life's actually gotten pretty good. The company's doing better than ever. Amazing what happens when nobody's stealing millions from it. Dad's been teaching me everything about running things. And turns out I actually like it. Numbers make sense when they're real. Bought a new house too. Nothing crazy fancy like Jake and Sarah's place, but it's perfect for me and Lumi. It has this huge window in the living room that she loves. She spends hours watching birds and judging me for not catching them for her. Life's been good though. I've even started dating again. Nothing too serious yet, but it's nice to be with someone who doesn't come with betrayal and a hidden agenda. Katie, still the best sister ever, comes over all the time with her kids, and my niece is obsessed with Lumi, always bringing her new toys and treats. Lumi pretends she's too good for them, but then plays with everything the second they leave. Classic cat move. Dad's doing great. Actually smiles more now that all the drama's over. He's talking about retiring soon, letting me take over completely. Says the company needs young blood who actually understands ethics. Pretty sure he was making a dig at Jake there. Mom would have liked how things turned out, I think. She always said honesty was more important than success. Guess she was right about that. Like she was about most things. I still think about everything sometimes. About how Jake and Sarah thought they were so smart, so above everyone else. About how they treated me like I was nothing because I was happy with a normal life. About all the times they made me feel small. But sitting here in my office, watching Lumi chase a sunbeam across my desk while I run the company Jake always bragged about carrying, I realized something. I won. Not by cheating or stealing or hurting people, just by being myself and doing things right. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and having a cat who thinks you're the greatest person in the world, even if all you do is bring her treats and clean her litter box. Edit. Thanks for all the awards and support. Lumi says thanks too. Actually, she didn't. She's asleep on my keyboard making typing this really hard. Edit 2. No, I won't share Sarah's social media or Jake's jail info. They're not worth the drama. Edit 3. And because everyone keeps asking, yes, Lumi is still the real boss of the company. She attended her first board meeting last week, slept through the whole thing but still made better decisions than Jake ever did.